A brutal battlefield stretches out, silent and cold in the wake of the most savage war in history. War is never beautiful, not even close. He looks around. He realizes the bitter truth. Every single one of his comrades lies dead. The monster slaughtered them all, left him broken, but completely furious. Standing before him is the shadow of terror itself, Cheonma, the demon leader. The Demon King mocks him. What an absolute tragedy, he says. To see the absolute pinnacle of Mount Hua reduced to this pathetic state. He claims it would be a blast if they could fight again someday. Chung Myung drags himself up. Living alone, worse than death, he spits back. No glory can ever make up for this, but he guarantees one thing. Cheonma will die. The demon laughs and tells him to feel proud. After all, he considers the hero to be the world's strongest sword. Gripping his blade with his last arm, Chung Myung strikes him down. Arrogant to the end, the demon's severed head finally rolls. In eerie silence, our hero feels the crushing weight of victory. He collapses onto the corpses, his strength gone, but his eyes remain fixed. He has to be sure the monster is dead. Then, memories return. Facing his own end, he reflects. Chung Myung, the legendary Blossom Blade. He was once known across the lands as the unmatched peak of martial arts. If only he had pushed himself harder, things might be different now. Left on the sect's doorstep as a baby, he grew up a total rebel. His master warned him, power without a soul is just raw violence. Back then he hated those lectures. Today, the regret cuts deeper than steel. If he had just taken it seriously, his friends might still be alive. Regret fills his weary mind, but then a gentle voice echoes, telling him to let go of the pain. This was their destiny. Mount Hua will endure. With that final, peaceful thought, his vision fades out. Wait, hold on, look at this sudden shift, crack. Our hero wakes up inside a dingy tent, groggily demanding to find Cheonma. A beggar standing over him with a stick sneers, completely ignoring the name. He calls him a lazy street mutt who should be out begging already. Sleep no way. Chung Myung is totally bewildered and deeply insulted. Staring at this filthy beggar, he demands the man drop the stick immediately. Unless he wants a beating, the beggar just laughs aloud. This drives him insane. Nobody gets to disrespect the legendary Blossom Blade. The beggar raises his wooden rod, warning the kid that he's in trouble. Chung Myung lunges forward, fully intending to teach this peasant a lesson. But he moves and freezes. Something is horribly wrong. Why are his arms so short? He tries to block. But he fails miserably, taking a solid, painful blow right to his forehead. The angry beggar keeps swinging, yelling about how his patience has run out. Whack after whack, suddenly a worried face peeks inside. Another street kid watches from a safe distance, shouting out in panic. He promises to return later before running off, wiping away a fresh nosebleed. Chung Myung cedes, swearing that this brutal little brat will pay for this. These were the beggars of the Beggars' Union, once proud members of the 10 great sects. Standing with his feet in the stream, his body trembles slightly as he peers down. Looking at his own reflection, a deep sense of dread washes over him. He cannot recognize the child staring back, no matter how hard he stares. Pulling at his cheeks, the boy wonders if this is actually reincarnation. If he knew rebirth was real, maybe he should have joined the Shaolin temple instead. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out, interrupting his thoughts. Chung Myung recognizes the boy who watched him get beaten in the tent. The kid approaches, muttering that Wang Cho always goes way too far. But our protagonist just raises a finger, signaling for a quiet moment. He says he has exactly 2 questions, his eyes shining with desperate curiosity. The other kid watches in confusion, as Chung Myung asks with a shaky, serious voice. He asks if he is a beggar, and the boy scoffs at the obvious question. Of course he is, just look at his filthy rags. Crushed by reality, Chung Myung crouches down before asking his second question. He desperately asks if the boy knows who Chung Myung actually is. The kid hesitates, thinking the brutal beating must have scrambled his brain. Annoyed, our main character demands a straight answer right now. The boy crosses his arms, thinks for a second, and gives a name. He asks if he means Cheonma, the demonic cult leader who died 100 years ago. Talk about a massive plot twist. Chung Myung freezes as those words echo in his mind. He cannot contain his shock and screams, repeating the unbelievable timeline. Grabbing the kid by his collar, he demands the truth. He asks with a shaking voice if it has really been 100 years. The boy just shrugs. He has no reason to make up such a lie. Sweat pours down Chung Myung's face as he slowly lets go, completely broken. It took a whole century for him to be reborn, alone in this new era. Burying his face in his hands, absolute despair washes over him. But then his mind rushes to his beloved Mount Hua sect. He has to know what became of his ancient home. But the boy just looks blank, having absolutely no clue what that is. Chung Myung panics and presses further. Surely a member of the Beggars' Union must know the famous Mount Hua sect. They were one of the legendary 10 great sects, after all. Yet the boy bluntly replies that no such sect exists on that list. In fact, he adds, the place does not even exist anymore. Chung Myung stands frozen, unable to process this devastating news. Refusing to believe it, he grabs the kid and shakes him violently. He screams in outrage, pointing out that even the Southern Island sect made the list. Even those country bumpkins from a distant island are on the list. This must mean Mount Hua was simply excluded, not wiped out entirely. The terrified boy struggles in his grip, trying to think of the name. He mutters that he might have seen it once on a map. Some old map of the Shanxi province, if he remembers correctly. Chung Myung stops instantly, begging to know if there is anything else. The young beggar rubbed his chin, thinking hard for a few seconds. Finally, he muttered that the legendary Mount Hua sect had already fallen. Hearing this, Chung Myung felt his entire world collapse right then and there. Pure despair, he just could not accept that his home met such a tragic end. To think one of the 3 greatest sects in the world was just gone. Completely drained of strength, he let go of the kid, who tumbled onto the dirt. While the boy groaned in pain, our protagonist stood frozen in absolute shock. His face was a mask of desperation. He refused to believe it. He clenched his fists, declaring that he had to see this ruin with his own eyes. There was no time to waste. He would set off for Mount Hua immediately. Scratching his neck, the other boy stared at him, utterly confused by this sudden madness. He warned that acts like this would only get them a one-way ticket to another beating. He bluntly suggested that the crazy beggar go look for food somewhere else. But he just snapped. Chung Myung demanded answers, tightly pressing a hand against his own stomach. He demanded to know whose body this was and what this boy's name was. Getting to his feet, the young kid scoffed that beggars do not have names. Round here, people simply referred to this weak little shell as Cho Sam. Pinching his cheeks, Chung Myung tried to guess his current age from the firm skin. He guessed 15 or 16, but the other kid could only shrug and say he had no clue. Determined, our hero pressed further, demanding the names of everyone in this beggar group. Specifically, the boy in front of him and the thug with the bamboo stick. The kid quickly answered. He was Ku Chil and the bully was Ku Pao. Though around these parts, that violent attacker was better known as Wang Cho. Taking a slow breath, Chung Myung told Ku Chil to listen very carefully. He warned that he pays back kindness twice over, but pays back grudges 10 times worse. Remember the name Chung Myung of the Mount Hua sect, because payback is coming next time. Today's beating would be settled soon. With that, he spun around to leave. He took a few confident steps forward, only to suddenly freeze and march right back. Wait, he had completely forgotten one crucial piece of information for his grand journey. Which way exactly is Mount Hua in the Shanxi province anyway? Ku Chil just let out a heavy sigh, realizing this guy was absolutely crazy. Next thing we know, our hero is sprinting through the open fields with all his might. He preferred traveling on foot because he never trusted slow carriages in his past life. His face turned bright red, and his lungs burned as he pushed past his limits. But without warning, his weak body gave out, and he collapsed into the dirt. This miserable, untrained frame just could not handle a few minutes of intense sprinting. Running was his only option, but keeping this up would literally kill him on the road. If he did not pace himself, he would end up dead long before reaching Shanxi. Face down in the mud, he lay perfectly still, racking his brain for a solution. Then a sudden sly grin broke across his dusty, exhausted face. He realized this was the exact moment his centuries of experience would shine. Shaking with pure excitement, he let out a wild, manic laugh. All he needed to do now was rebuild his lost martial arts power from scratch. Nobody else would ever realize what an absolute cheat code of an opportunity this was. Many experts regretted their youth, wishing they had focused more on the absolute fundamentals. He remembered how they complained when their masters constantly forced them to train, wishing they had at least pretended to be dedicated, and they definitely shouldn't have been caught drinking their masters. Hidden liquor. Thinking back on this, Chung Myung paused for a second and decided to ignore that part because honestly, that wine was just too delicious. But none of that mattered now. Everything was fresh and he had to start from complete scratch. First, he needed a quiet spot far away from any noisy distractions, and his eyes quickly locked onto a tall, perfect-looking tree. The boy sat down at the base of the trunk, took a deep breath, and started to plan out his very first lesson. His mind held countless advanced theories, complex martial arts, and high-level methods of cultivating internal energy. But he knew he shouldn't limit himself to just advanced sect techniques, needing to master his focus and find true balance first. Soon, with his eyes closed in deep focus, the boy opened them, his expression becoming firm and resolved. He recalled the equilibrium technique, a basic martial art, considered pretty simple and sold for low prices in black markets. For a moment, he questioned why he should even bother with something so basic, but deep down he knew the truth. This technique was no common trash, but rather the cornerstone of the Mount Hua sect, where every single disciple began. The equilibrium technique did not drastically boost internal power, but it purified the body impeccably, serving as the true cornerstone. Realizing there was no reason to rush, he knew he had to build a rock-solid foundation capable of supporting every single thing that would come later. Calmly, he began organizing the energy flowing around him, refining each small fragment with total precision, like aligning delicate threads in some complex fabric, eliminating every last impurity he found. The energy began to pool deep inside him, gathering right at the center of his body. Subtle light glowed in his abdomen, and the boy realized he had achieved the perfect state of focus. This core would unlock a whole new world, starting as a tiny spark that would eventually become an unstoppable force. The boy tried to stand up to keep moving forward, but his physical body completely failed him. Since his physical frame could not support the flow, he fell back down. Completely drained by the process, Chung Myung faced the pretty harsh reality that this technique was useless when his body had to move right away. Suddenly, his old master's voice echoed in his head, telling him he sometimes forgot to use his own brain. Desperate, the boy screamed out, wondering how on earth he would ever reach Mount Hua like this. The scene shifts to a simple town market where regular folks are buying and selling, while two children run past the stalls carrying heavy baskets, leaning against a wall. A boy is chilling out when a sudden voice calls him over. The newcomer points down the street, saying some new beggar kid is raking in serious money. He explains it is just some little kid, but everyone is tossing him coins. The boy slowly stands up, deciding it is finally time to teach this child a lesson. And his two nervous friends quickly nod along. They head over toward long-haired boy who is busy collecting all the cash. This tough-looking beggar leader barks out to get his attention, but gets absolutely nothing. He yells again, demanding to know if the kid is deaf. Finally, the boy reacts, still slowly chewing, and looks right back at the three thugs with his mouth stuffed, asking if they are talking to him. This casual attitude instantly triggers the leader, who completely loses his cool, muttering that the kid has clearly gone insane so young, cracking his knuckles loudly. He lays down the law, stating he has no clue who allowed the brat to beg here, but he can crawl away safely if he hands over all his food. Chung Myung stares back with an unexpectedly intense look, then quietly glances down at the precious meal in his hands. He fires back without a single shred of hesitation, asking if they possess any pride at all, calling them pathetic bums who will not be taking not a single bite. Slowly, the young protagonist stands up and stretches his arms. He knows he pushed them too far. The consequences are now absolutely unavoidable. He starts warming up, twisting his shoulders, testing out this tiny new frame, repeatedly opening and clenching his small fists to prep for a real fight. Chung Myung knows this internal core is far from perfect, but it should be plenty. Now, getting a feel for this body, he drops one final brutal insult, claiming he is pretty weak and probably cannot punch very hard, but the three of them are still going to get thoroughly thrashed today. Honestly, who could blame the beggar leader for losing his mind here? Screaming at his two lackeys to rush forward and end him, one thug winds up a massive heavy swing, but his fist merely strikes empty air as Chung Myung effortlessly dodges. With a slight tilt of his head, his eyes tracking every motion, right after the boy counterattacks with a heavy fist directly to his opponent's face. The impact is absolutely brutal, sending the thug flying backward through the air. Crashing heavily onto the hard dirt, Chung Myung's hand stings pretty badly from the impact, but he does not hesitate for a second, proudly declaring himself the Plum Blossom Sword Saint of the legendary Mount Hua sect. He advances, unleashing a storm of new attacks. Calling his opponents miserable wretches, very quickly the entire skirmish is completely over. The three bullies are on the ground, bruised and kneeling, begging. Over and over, Chung Myung looks down, asking why they are calling a beggar. Boss, the leader, bows even lower, crying out for forgiveness. The young hero wipes his dusty hands and gets a brilliant idea, asking if they know the quickest route to Shanxi province. With a horribly swollen face, one of them whimpers that it is totally obvious that since they are just low-level street beggars, they would not know anything useful like that. Suggesting he ask a smarter person instead, Chung Myung lets out a hearty, carefree laugh. Realizing he was looking for smart answers from complete fools, the thugs also laugh. Relieved, the mood relaxes, but suddenly everything completely changes. The boy violently grabs the leader's collar, his gaze turning absolutely freezing, and he gives him a chilling warning for their next possible meeting, if he ever asks another question. There had better be a solid answer, or things will end very badly. He shoves the terrified beggar away, ordering the three of them to scram. Immediately, sometime later, the vast sky is painted a beautiful orange as the sun begins to set. A man with a long beard quietly watches the scenery. Someone calls out, calling him the great sect leader. Outside the door, the visitor introduces himself as Am. Granted entry, the wooden door slowly creaks open. Letting in the light, Han explains the situation, saying it is nothing urgent, but a child wants to see him. Curious, the two look toward the entrance. Then a figure emerges, dirty and bruised, but with a confident smile. The boy introduces himself as Chung Myung and declares his desire to join the Mount Hua sect. A man with gray hair and a beard watches him. Intently, he turns to Am, asking if they already informed the kid that they are no longer accepting disciples. Am explains that the kid did not care and insisted on meeting him face to face. Meanwhile, Chung Myung keeps holding his rigid pose with a forced smile, but inside, a massive wave of frustration is brewing. To understand this mess, we have to go back in time. Exhausted and sweating, the boy leans on his stick, realizing he finally reached his destination, Mount Hua. The shortcut those beggars showed him was completely useless, and he swears he will never forgive them for this. Tossing the stick aside, Chung Myung fires himself up with pure determination, knowing it was finally time to begin climbing the great mountain. Pushing forward, the young boy begins climbing the steep and dangerous terrain, pouring every single ounce of his remaining strength into the steep climb. But at a critical moment, one of the rocks he is holding starts to crumble, making him lose his balance and swing in midair. The stone plummets to the ground with a loud crash, making Chung Myung shudder at the horrific thought of falling down with it. Still, he knows that persistence makes the impossible happen, so his hand quickly grabs another ledge, and he resumes his steady climb. The setting sun paints the sky in shades of deep orange. Exhausted from the brutal journey, he reaches the top only to notice that something incredibly important is missing: the main sect sign, which Sahyungjang Moon cleans so carefully every single morning, is simply completely gone. Staring at the empty gate makes Chung Myung feel like he is losing his mind, and his loud shouting finally brings someone to the entrance. A man cautiously opens the door to inspect the visitor. He is shocked to find a small kid, asking how he got up here. Chung Myung ignores the question, asking if the man belongs to Mount Hua. The man says yes, which gives the kid hope that the sect has not completely vanished from the face of the earth. Relieved, Am invites the young boy inside, explaining that while they do not normally take in guests, it is far too cold and dangerous to make the trek back down this freezing mountain at night. But the moment Chung Myung steps inside, his expression shifts. The grounds, once covered in clean, beautiful marble, are now completely cracked and buried under layers of dirt. Hiding his shock, the boy tells Am that the grand place still seems fairly spacious, but walking further, he notices another massive problem. The golden palace is gone. He points to the empty space, unable to hide his dismay, and asks if something was built there. Am confirms a palace once stood. Am stood there, proudly remarking that it was quite impressive for a young kid to notice such a detail. He added that while it was pretty embarrassing for a martial artist to admit that missing palace was actually a scar of glory. But Chung Myung cut him off, stating there was absolutely no glory in it. AM did not really get what he meant, so the kid just let it go. Walking on, Chung Myung realized he could not really blame the old monk. None of this was Am's fault. Everyone here had probably struggled hard, just to keep their dying sect from fading away completely. Soon, the pair reached the Yu Yuan temple, which to the boys' massive relief was still standing. Of course, since this is a martial arts sect, guests have certain duties. Sliding open the door, AM told the young guest to go inside and get ready to pay his respects to the ancestors, but something felt off. Looking around the dusty room, Chung Myung noticed yet another glaring change. Staring at the altar, he realized all the most sacred treasures were missing. Where was the golden candlestick gifted by the Grand Emperor himself? Or the legendary handwritten scroll left behind by their great founder? All the gold-plated ornaments and rare paintings had vanished. The room was completely cleaned out, standing there in a state of absolute shock. Chung Myung started stammering, desperately looking for one specific flower. Quite impressed, AM wondered how on earth this young kid knew about that. Stroking his chin thoughtfully, the monk recalled the object in question. There was indeed a plum blossom crafted from a rare white metal once, but they had sold it off a while ago since it was just useless clutter. It did not fit the temple vibe at all. Talk about a massive facepalm. Chung Myung literally fell to his knees, his heart aching for Sa Hyung. Their beloved Mount Hua sect was truly ruined. That flower was no ordinary trinket. It was a sacred relic keeping their righteous spirit alive, yet these fools had sold it off like cheap garbage. Angry and determined, the boy realized he had to step in before they ruined everything else. Dropping any remaining pride, he fell to his knees and begged to meet the sect leader, screaming at the top of his lungs that he wanted to join them. Back in the present, the sect leader carefully considered the boy's request. He gently asked if the kid was already familiar with their teachings. And Chung Myung, utterly stunned, wondered if getting in was really this easy. Either way, he already had an incredibly detailed cover story ready to go. He would simply claim to be connected to the late disciple, Chung Jin. The lie was simple. Chung Jin had vanished during the war, falling down a steep cliff where a kind woodcutter took him in and healed him. Out of gratitude, he taught the woodcutter their signature martial arts. Chung Myung would then claim to be that very woodcutter's direct descendant. This genius move would instantly secure him a high rank in the hierarchy. Closing his eyes, he braced himself for the intense questioning and disbelief. But completely defying his expectations, the old man simply nodded. He approved his entry immediately. An incredibly awkward silence filled the room. As Chung Myung stood frozen, unable to process his ridiculous stroke of luck, the sect leader nodded. If the kid wanted to join, his wish was granted. A baffled AM reminded him they weren't accepting new members anymore. But the leader just smiled. He had completely changed his mind. Oh, you just know Chung Myung is absolutely losing his mind here. The leader simply continued reasoning. The kid's motives didn't matter. He came to them for help. He compared him to a tiny bird seeking shelter from heavy rain. And for that simple reason, they absolutely could not turn him away. He told AM to prepare a room and the ceremony. Our hero stood frozen in disbelief. He could barely even speak. His plan to climb the ranks had just taken a nosedive. Later, AM handed him the uniform of a third-class disciple. Chung Myung scanned the room, trying to recognize the place. He only remembered it being for guests. It felt weird. In the old days, disciples stayed right in their master's quarters. He wondered who else was here, but was suddenly interrupted. A harsh voice demanded to know who was sneaking around. Chung Myung turned around. A very angry kid was glaring right at him. The boy demanded to know why he was snooping outside his room. A crowd gathered. They quickly complained to a senior disciple. They claimed Chung Myung was sneaking around, causing a scene. This loud commotion soon caught the attention of an older master. With a very firm voice, he scolded the young men for making trouble. Training was still going on. They shouldn't be causing a scene. The students quickly bowed, apologizing to the junior master Sasek. The Sasek finally noticed Chung Myung, who formally introduced himself. He recognized the boy as the newcomer to the White Plum Pension. Since it was already late, he told the boy to rest up and train tomorrow. He then ordered the rest of them back downstairs immediately. Before walking away, that angry senior glared at Chung Myung. He warned our hero that he would definitely deal with him later on. Alone in the hallway, Chung Myung tried to calm himself down. These boys were his successors, so he needed to guide them, even if his personal methods were going to be a bit rough. Under the starry night sky, that annoying senior ordered him outside. He demanded he strip. Our hero was completely taken aback. The senior claimed removing all their clothes was how men built close bonds. Chung Myung's face made it clear he was not happy. And trust me, you do not want to see this kid angry. He calmly asked where their head instructor, Sasek Ungum, was. The senior laughed, saying the instructor didn't do night training. He smiled, saying they would start with their own warm-up. Before the guy could even move, Chung Myung told him to flex his neck. The bully had no time to react before a fist slammed his cheek. The punch was so fast and powerful that he didn't even realize what hit him. The punch connects and a massive crash echoes from the temple roof. Meanwhile, the other disciples stare in absolute shock. That single strike literally sent the kid flying. He is actually lodged straight into the ceiling, wearing a twisted, sadistic grin. Chung Myung asks if they really want to skip straight to the warm-up. Next thing they know, he is screaming and calling every senior a complete bastard. The sheer fury in his voice sends nearby birds scattering into the sky. Sometime later, a senior named Yoon Jong is massaging our hero's shoulders. Chung Myung tells him to put some real muscle into it, and Yoon Jong quickly complies. He promises to do his absolute best. Meanwhile, Chung Myung calls out to Jo Gul. He promises he won't hurt him, gently coaxing the terrified senior to step closer. Chung Myung explains he is still figuring this place out and has some burning questions. First, he wants to know what happened to the legendary Golden Celestial Palace. And why is this place such a disaster, with his face horribly swollen? Jo Gul starts explaining. He asks if the newcomer ever heard of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Our hero immediately realizes they're talking about none other than his own past life. According to the elders, the Sword Saint played the most vital role in defeating the evil leader Cheonma, but in their rage, the surviving demonic sect invaded the Gyeongmuan region and burned these mountains to the ground. The damage was so devastating that their sect never managed to recover its former glory. Hearing this, Chung Myung starts sweating, realizing he might actually be the entire problem. Talk about awkward. Later on, during a private conversation, someone brings up their Te Flumic sword technique, calling it completely useless and lacking any real Taoist essence. They wouldn't even care if it was thrown out entirely. Chung Myung fully agrees to dump it, but his senior Sahyung hesitates. He says it is too complicated since ancestors passed down the manual. Our hero then suggests hiding it inside the locked library so the younger kids never stumble upon it. Sahyung loves the plan and agrees to do just that. After a brief silence, the senior brother changes the subject. He explains that he didn't summon Chung Myung just to complain. He wants the young man to start leading, asking how he would teach. Caught off guard by this unexpected question, our hero stops chewing. He snaps his cookie in half and responds without a single doubt. He asks what is so hard about training kids. It is simple, really. You just beat your disciples to the very edge of absolute death. Only then can they make the impossible happen. Sahyung is left speechless. After that, Sahyung Jang-moon never brings up training methods again. Some ideas are just too extreme. One day, while he relaxes, someone calls out his name with heavy, formal respect. Chung Myung lazily waves it off, but the strict instructor, Ungum, arrives. He orders the boy to join the active training grounds immediately. Starting today, he is a full participant, with a sharp bark. The master commands his disciples to draw their shining weapons. They obey instantly, raising their swords high as the next command approaches. Everyone swinging their weapons with absolute grit. Up on the hill, Chung Myung stood beside Ungum with a pretty weird look, watching them as if he beheld something incredibly bizarre. The elder's sword technique was simply stiff. Ungum explained that it was the core equilibrium sword style, claiming it was absolutely vital for mastering every other Mount Hua technique. Chung Myung stood frozen, wondering what kind of garbage these masters were feeding the younger disciples. This nonsense only made it much harder for them to grow strong. Like teaching basic reading using a heavy, advanced grammar book. Sure, the kids might show quick progress, but empty techniques without any real foundation would never carry a warrior very far. but he was determined. If these kids were going to rebuild the sect, they had to do it properly. Right then, a sudden distraction caught our hero's attention. Prompting him to look up, the sky above was completely clear, just like Mount Hua's empty future. Sinking into deep frustration, Chung Myung had absolutely no idea where to even start. He waved over the elder in charge of the training and asked what other styles they practiced besides this one. Ungum answered that after mastering the equilibrium style, they moved on to the Seven Sages sword technique, followed eventually by the lesser Qing style. Chung Myung groaned inwardly, but the elder kept going, happily explaining that after all of that, they finally unlocked the ultimate technique, the legendary Tei Flummox sword style. Hearing this, the young warrior was utterly flabbergasted. He instantly remembered a past chat with Shang Moon, where they both agreed that this style was actually completely useless, deciding they wouldn't care if it got erased forever. But get this. This was the very technique being taught as their grand, peak style, completely ignoring the legendary 24-movement Plum Blossom sword style. As the instructor walked off to yell at some slacking disciples, darkness began to blanket the mountain. Later that evening, Joe Gull was called in, deeply startled. He desperately tried to show proper respect and act formal with Chung Myung, but the kid brushed the pleasantries aside and cut straight to the point. Could Joe Gull do him a quick favor? He wanted the senior to assemble everyone right outside the Plum Blossom residence at 5 in the morning, ready with a list of things he was about to name, starting with 5 specific types of people. The night grew deeper as they talked, scratching his head in utter confusion. Joe Gull repeated the instructions to make sure. Chung Myung caught his hesitation, teasingly asking if this was too hard for him, but the senior insisted he could manage. Pleased by his spirit, our protagonist dismissed him. Left alone under the moonlight, Chung Myung fell into deep thought. In their present state, these kids had absolutely no physical power, technique, or natural talent. Honestly, it was a miracle the sect had not completely dissolved. Of those crucial areas, the only factor he could actively reshape was their talent. This third generation of disciples looked pretty hopeless, but as the old saying goes, even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Watching Joe Gull slip away, he accepted that whipping these soft seniors into shape would be his beginning. Just as ordered, a small crowd assembled right where Chung Myung had called them out. Half the disciples were half asleep, grumbling about why a newcomer could order his seniors around so easily. Joe Gull, however, figured this grumbling senior must not have been around when they all got trashed. Right on cue, the freshman himself materialized behind them, calmly asking if he was the annoying newcomer the boy was crying about. Instantly, everyone froze in sheer panic, while the loudmouth's eyes went wide as saucers. Furious, the senior snapped back, saying waking them at 5 in the morning showed zero respect. Hearing this, our main character simply closed his eyes, holding back his temper. Then, with a sugary fake voice, he addressed his seniors, apologizing politely and admitting he was completely in the wrong. To make amends, he invited the complainer inside the building for a private chat, grabbing a few others along with them, sliding the heavy doors shut to hide whatever was about to happen. The remaining disciples stood outside in dead silence, wondering what was going on. As they stared closer, they began to notice something highly unusual about the roof. The entire structure began to violently rattle and shake from the inside out. Dust erupted as desperate, frantic movements could be seen up on the roof. Moments later, the terrified boys who went inside with Chung Myung scrambled out, sprinting away in pure terror. Smiling, the freshmen praised their speed but whispered for them to be quiet and not disturb their great Sasuk. Then he approached the crowd and announced that from now on, morning training would start at this exact time. Soon enough, the horizon began to glow as the morning sun slowly rose. Golden sunlight filtered through the windows, waking up the great Sasuk, who immediately sensed something was wrong. Usually, disciples would be waiting to greet him, but the hallways were dead silent, making him think they all overslept. Swinging his legs out of bed, he got up and dressed himself, guessing the disciples were probably sleeping in after throwing some wild rite of passage. Determined to teach those lazy punks a lesson they would never forget, the Sasuk stepped out of his room, marching down the hall toward the courtyard. But as he crossed the threshold, something bizarre made him freeze in his tracks. His eyes nearly popped out, seeing every single disciple collapsed on the dirt. Bruised, battered, and groaning in agony. Stunned, he demanded to know what Kind of disaster had struck, shouting at the nearest student for an explanation. The boys just exchanged terrified glances, too frightened to utter a word. Leaving Ungum totally baffled, that was when he spotted Joe Gull looking. Absolutely wrecked, dragging a heavy wooden practice sword across his shoulders, right behind. Him was the freshman, training with a blade weighted down by two massive boulders. The thick ropes were fraying under the strain as the boy kept squatting. He braced the crushing load, sweat pouring down his flushed, determined face. His knees shook violently, yet he refused to stop, pushing the heavy weight. Back up to complete squat number 10,085, drenched in sweat and panting heavily, Chung Myung turned to face the Sasuk. Upon recognizing him, the boy offered a polite greeting. Ungum could only stare in utter disbelief, realizing this kid possessed an absurd amount of strength. Though his knees shook, Chung Myung stood tall with zero intention of quitting. Baffled, Ungum quickly yelled for someone to fetch the kid some water. Ignore the loud protests, he hands over the canteen immediately. The kid gulps the water down greedily. Once recovered, Ungum gets serious. There is some explaining to do. He demands to know everything. He points a finger at the bruised bodies lying in the dirt. Water dripping from his mouth, an exhausted Chung Myung merely smiles. No big deal, just a quick morning training run, he says. He claims everyone just got a little too excited since it was day one. Ungum looks around for confirmation. Nobody wants to back him up. They shake their heads. They stop instantly when Chung Myung glares. The Sasuk realizes the truth. They are terrified of this newcomer. He looks at them, Flower Mountain disciples, trembling like leaves. It is shameful, shaking before a beginner who just arrived. He rubs his chin, planning a harsh punishment, but stops. Instead, he focuses on Chung Myung. Who does this kid think he is? There are rules here. Nobody authorized training at this ungodly hour. They certainly did not agree to sacrifice their sleep. Chung Myung stays quiet. His expression is completely calm and serene. He replies gently, if the master wishes, we will stop immediately. This polite answer completely throws the Sasuk off balance. The kid keeps that polite smile, leaving Ungum in a real bind. Punishing him makes his senior disciples look absolutely pathetic and weak. But letting it slide destroys his own authority. He looks like a fool. He is trapped, but wait, the kid is about to pivot. Chung Myung breaks the silence. Give me 1 month, he asks. He begs the Sasuk for one single chance to prove himself. He adds that he deeply respects and admires these seniors. Even with this brutal training, not a single one has complained. He raises his hand high, asking the crowd to confirm it. They all nod in absolute terror. No one disagrees. Ungum watches this closely. He gets it now. Nobody has the guts to cross this boy. But there is something else here, something very different. He looks at that slim frame, wondering where this monster came from. The Sasuk warns him it will not be easy. Why insist on morning training? Zero hesitation. Chung Myung has his answer ready to go. Normal teachings make them strong, but extra effort is the secret. They will rise much faster if they sacrifice just a little rest. Ungum asks what the most important aspect of this training is. The boy smiles warmly and replies that the key is courtesy. He promises to treat every word from his seniors as sacred teaching. Ungum realizes the truth. The kid is not trying to break the rules. Instead, he is playing a genius mind game to rule from within. A tiny smile creeps onto the master's face. The kid is deadly serious. Ungum turns to the exhausted crowd and stomps his foot hard. The ground shakes. The Sasuk raises his booming voice. He is impressed. He openly praises their incredible determination. He believed that if they kept pushing, they would get incredible results, and so he gave them full permission to continue their extra training, terrified. Disciples trembled and begged for mercy with their eyes, but the great Sasuk just turned his back and walked away. Meanwhile, a smiling Chung Myung slowly cracked his knuckles. Facing his seniors, he calmly said he did not intend to completely break them, but suggested they have a friendly chat in the dorms. Later, the seniors froze. Their pale faces showed absolute pure terror. Soon after, violent crashes and loud, painful screams began echoing from deep inside the building. A few days pass. The young master sits quietly, concentrating his inner energy. He notes that while the disciples have tiny energy cores, they are already making progress. Around this time, our hero realizes that the White Plum boarding house is basically just a fancy private dorm. Exactly as he guessed, it turns out the sect leader has noble blood. But he is just another weakling. His current strength simply cannot compare to the masters from 100 years ago. Naturally, his disciples reflect this, since most are third-class slackers who only join for social prestige. But as he focuses, Chung Myung knows none of this actually matters. He is here now and he is determined, finishing his deep meditation. The boy stands up, his feet are planted firmly, he is fully ready to rebuild the strongest sect in all of Kangho. A little later, over in the dining hall, the disciples are eating. One poor guy is shaking so badly that his chopsticks are practically flying out of his hand. Dropping food everywhere, he complains that they trained way too hard today, leaving them unable to even feed themselves, and begs Joe Gull to speak. To the absolute lunatic running their morning training sessions, Joe Gull sighs, closes his eyes and tells them they talk too much. He slams his chopsticks back on the table and asks if he looks like a messenger. He tells them that if they have a real problem, solve it themselves. Annoyed, he gets up without even touching a single bite of food and asks his senior brother to step out for a quick talk. Later, the two walk down a beautifully lit corridor lined with cherry blossom trees. His friend notes that Joe Gull seems much happier lately. Joe Gull looks up at the night sky, asking what his friend really thinks of Mount Hua. The senior hesitates, admitting it is a pretty tough question. Joe Gull points out that his time here is temporary before returning home, unlike his dedicated friend who plans to stay forever, which the senior confirms. A heavy silence hangs between them until Joe Gull suddenly makes an admission. He thought Mount Hua was dead. His shocked friend warns him to be respectful, but Joe Gull shakes his head. His mind has completely changed. Ever since Chung Myung showed up, everything became totally different. Even under brutal pressure, they are evolving and shattering their limits. Yet that crazy kid never shows a single sign of fatigue. He trains harder than anyone, and watching him, Joe Gull decided to finally try his hardest, turning to face his brother with a determined grin. He declares that he wants to become strong enough to guide their sect. World, his companion, offered a soft smile, admitting that he felt the exact same way. Meanwhile, as they spoke, a quiet figure watched them from high up in the tree branches. It was Chung Myung, who had calmly listened to their whole conversation without making a single sound. A smug grin spread across his face. He knew he had just one too. Moreover, convincing Ungam had been pretty simple too, but there was still a massive mountain to climb. Before he could think further, a harsh shout suddenly shattered the quiet night air. Some angry voice outside was loudly demanding to see the sect leader right this instant. Startling Chung Myung, heavy, violent bangs suddenly rattled the main gate, demanding they open up. The rowdy crowd outside slammed against the wood with so much raw force that they shattered the gates. Hostile men carrying burning torches began flooding into the courtyard. Terrified staff members tried to block their path, insisting they couldn't just barge in. While Chung Myung watched from his branch, completely baffled by the sudden chaos. The aggressive intruders completely lost their temper. They were done waiting. Screaming at the top of their lungs, they demanded immediate payment right now. They wanted to know exactly when they would get their cash back. Just then, suddenly the truth clicked for the kid. This legendary sect was drowning in massive debt. The rowdy crowd kept shouting, demanding that the sect leader show his face. Finally, the main doors swung open. The leader stepped out to confront the angry mob. Their hostile glares made the air feel incredibly thick. Chung Myung quietly slipped closer to watch as the leader calmly asked what brought them here so late at night. Chung Myung watched his posture closely. Even now, the man looked impeccably dignified. He truly looked like the leader of the great Mount Hua sect, and elegant grace followed his every movement, and his words carried natural, undeniable authority, as though he was born to lead. The rowdy intruders, however, were not impressed at all. They mocked his proud posture. One man stepped forward, cleared his throat mockingly, and with a fake, greasy smile, asked how the sect leader had been keeping. Jang Moon replied with perfect composure, saying he had not expected the Kong Pavilion leader to visit. The merchant sneered, claiming he had no desire to climb the mountain either, but his hand was forced. He complained about the exhausting trek up Mount Hua, then got straight to business, reminding them that their payment deadline had passed a long time ago. The greedy owner explained that they had shown quite a lot of patience, but everything had its limits. Technically, the contract allowed them to demand massive fines. Yet out of respect for their old friendship, they would not be so ruthless. Instead, he gave them one last chance, exactly 7 days to pay up in full. If they failed, they would take everything the Mount Hua sect owned to settle it. Talk about a total disaster. The shocking news made a tiny gasp escape Chung Myung, drawing the eyes of the angry crowd right to his hiding spot in the tree. One thug grumbled that the brat had just witnessed something he definitely should not have. Later on, the disciples gathered to whisper about the powerful merchants of the Hua district. This left Chung Myung deeply anxious about what this heavy debt meant for their future. Joe Gull walked over and asked if the Hua district merchants were really based right down at the foot of the mountain, and his friend nodded in agreement. He had a strong feeling the sect owed them big time, but nobody knew. For sure, the other disciple then mentioned that he knew the wealthy merchant who ran the Kong Pavilion, noting he also owned the massive Taehua Pavilion, the largest in the Hua district, a highly influential figure in various business circles. Hearing this, Chung Myung instantly snapped and asked about the pavilion. The others stared in shock at the sudden tension gripping his face, telling him to back off because his face was practically twisted with rage, but Chung Myung already knew the truth. The Taehua Pavilion originally belonged entirely to Mount Hua. It was their property. He suddenly lunged forward, grabbing the boy's collar and aggressively demanded to know if that greedy man was truly the pavilion's owner and was still trying to take their temple after lending them money. The boy squeaked out a yes. Chung Myung slowly let go, his mind racing. If the pavilion belonged to the sect, borrowing from it made absolutely no sense. Something was deeply twisted here, and you can bet someone was going to pay. Their entire approach was completely backward. With a sharp, icy gaze, Chung Myung looked over at Joe Gull and demanded he bring that specific item. Joe Gull caught on instantly, nodded quickly, and ran off to grab it. He returned a moment later, carrying a dark plain black robe, and handed it to him. Still highly confused, Joe Gull asked what he wanted to do with it, but Chung Myung simply shared a classic teaching. He noted that the saying to slay the Buddha if you meet him was about letting go of any attachment, blocking your ultimate path forward. Slipping into the dark clothes, he murmured again, stating that to walk the true path of the Tao, one must learn to shatter their own limits. Ready to go, he declared he was heading out, but the others laughed at his bizarre outfit, saying he looked completely ridiculous dressed like that. Chung Myung ignored them and, without looking back, leaped across the rooftops like a silent shadow. In the night, moments later, he stopped on a roof overlooking the city below. His target was a massive, brightly lit, luxurious manor. Meanwhile, inside, wealthy merchants gathered, feasting and gossiping about the sect. Leader 1 brought up their massive debt of over 100,000 Yang, while another noted how terrifying Leader Kang's presence truly was. Soon, the pavilion owner himself spoke, claiming that while he always chased profit, he hated this deal due to their long, multi-generational relationship. Another merchant agreed, but pointed out that the generous owner had already been incredibly patient and let them off multiple times. Everyone toasted his mercy, and the owner casually hoped he was right. But as he drank, he silently mocked how naive these merchants were. He knew Mount Hua was a tiger that should never be underestimated. Its true power was not just martial arts, but its deep historical legacy. Across the entire province, nearly everyone held ties to it, yet the sect had withered, now looking so fragile it could easily crumble. He lazily compared their fate to the roasted duck skin on his plate, which tore apart effortlessly at the mere touch of his chopsticks. A tipsy merchant asked what they would actually do with the temple once they seized it, suggesting other assets instead. The pavilion owner shook his head. The temple was worth far. It was worth far more than it seemed. It looked simple, but held immense value. Chewing his food, the man quietly mocked how foolish those greedy merchants really were. Then, he set his chopsticks down and spoke firmly, claiming he could not reveal everything. But they could easily use those 6 enemies to their absolute advantage, especially since other powerful sects would pay a fortune to wipe Mount Hua off the map. He glanced around, assuring everyone that their heavy investments would pay off big. Excited, the merchant stood up to praise his cleverness, and soon wine was pouring freely. They toasted to endless wealth and good health. Not long after, the drunken man stumbled out of the tavern, his steps incredibly shaky. He kept thinking that if he could just squeeze that money from the sect, he would live in luxury. For the rest of his days, strolling along, he looked up and noticed that the moon was completely missing from the night sky. realizing it was a new moon. He reminded himself to always stick to the main roads on pitch-black nights, flushed. From all that heavy drinking, drowsiness washed over him until something caught his eye. A strange figure materialized right in front of him, though his vision remained blurry. He squinted hard and the image finally sharpened. A person clad in solid black. Looking like a ninja, stood waiting. The figure spoke in a firm, steady voice. Ordering the man to halt, the drunk merchant actually found the whole situation hilarious. This kid looked like he stepped straight out of some storybook and was pretty short. Crossing his arms, he smirked and asked if the boy was just some thief. Chung Myung calmly replied that he had absolutely zero interest in money. He just wanted some honest answers, promising to let him leave unharmed if he simply cooperated. The man sighed, muttering that it was not about his willingness to talk, but that he was not alone. Right on cue, several shadowy figures stepped out. They were closing in fast, his personal guards. Chung Myung instantly recognized they were highly trained mercenaries. One bodyguard asked for orders, but his drunken boss told them not to kill the brat, just capture him but keep him talking. The merchant walked away, despising violence, heading down the road without looking back, listening to the clash of battle. Heavy impacts, dull thuds, a sharp crack, and the unmistakable sound of breaking bones. He assumed his men were giving the kid a brutal beating, until a massive earth-shaking crash forced him to stop. Startled, he glanced back, grumbling that he specifically told them to keep the kid in one piece too. And honestly, what he saw next would make anyone freeze right in their tracks. All of his elite bodyguards were face down, completely destroyed. Only Chung Myung remained standing. The boy calmly noted that people really do not know how to listen, especially when someone speaks as clearly as he does. There are always those who choose to ignore simple warnings. The young martial artist beckoned with his hand, repeating his earlier deal. If the merchant answered his questions, he could walk away completely unscathed. But suddenly, Chung Myung lunged forward, grabbing the terrified drunk by the collar. His gaze turned icy cold as he clenched his fist, speaking in a low, dangerous tone. If he had just talked from the start, none of this pain would be necessary. Now there are consequences. The young warrior raised his massive fist, preparing to strike, yet whispered calmly that he should not worry, because he would still be able to talk afterward. Not long after, the drunkard sits there with a thoroughly bruised face, reluctantly coughing up answers and speaking with great difficulty. Clenching his fist, Chung Myung warns him, talk or get hurt. Spill the truth right now, otherwise get ready for round 2. He asks if the man actually loaned over 100,000 nyongs. The trembling drunkard nods, confirming the massive debt. Hearing this, Chung Myung crosses his arms with a heavy sigh, then yells to get the man's attention, pointing out that even if they sold off every single piece of clothing here, they wouldn't even make 10,000 nyongs, so how in the world did a dying sect secure a loan of 100,000? The terrified drunkard stammers, a weak excuse. He explains that unpaid loans pile up insanely fast because of sky-high interest. It just kept snowballing, far beyond the original amount. Annoyed by his shady logic, Chung Myung smacks him hard on the head. Stop acting proud, he snaps. Then he demands to know about his shop. The drunkard confirms he owns the prominent fabric store in Huom. Now, Chung Myung. He wants to know when he took it over, but the battered merchant. The merchant mumbles that his family has run the shop for generations. That strikes. And here is the crazy part. Chung Myung knows that fabric shop, along with other top local businesses, originally belonged to the Mount Hua sect. They were all. Everything was stolen when his beloved sect fell on hard times, furious at the injustice. He dishes out another beating. Suddenly, an angry voice rings out, calling him a coward who only wins by cheap surprise attacks. Standing tall, an armed swordsman gets to his feet and demands to know who he is. The man introduces himself as a professional escort warrior named Young Bin. Chung Myung just shrugs, completely unbothered. Why should he care? Young Bin glares coldly, muttering that he likes to know the names of those who die by his sword, even though he was just beaten by him. Bleeding but stubborn, the warrior steps forward and slowly draws his blade. His sword slices through the air with a sudden, vicious burst of raw speed and power, showing he is definitely no pushover. But Chung Myung does not even flinch, unfazed. He knows raw strength does not win a real fight. With a lightning-fast grab, he snatches a weapon from a fallen thug and effortlessly blocks the bodyguard's strike. Young Bin is stunned. He cannot even track the kid's speed. At this moment, Chung Myung taps into decades of combat experience from his past life as the legendary sword saint. To make up for his small, untrained body, he redirects his opponents. Momentum sending the warrior crashing backward into the dirt. Pressing the advantage, he spins around to deliver a decisive finishing blow. But he stops his strike midair, the threat is gone. The warrior has completely passed out. Shaking his head, Chung Myung telling the unconscious man to train harder and try again when he is stronger. He tosses both of their weapons aside, finishing the brief skirmish. But just as he relaxes, a sudden shout reminds him of his actual target. Chung Myung tensed. If he used his sword techniques, his identity was blown. The strange man observed him closely, noting his refined and high-level skill. Chung Myung broke into a cold sweat as his heart raced, terrified. 1,000 dark doubts flashed through his mind as he waited for doom. But the clueless drunkard just asked if he belonged to the Southern Edge sect. Silence, an incredibly heavy, awkward silence. After a tense pause, Chung Myung simply nodded. The drunkard grinned, satisfied. He told the boy to ask him anything, promising to answer everything honestly. Eventually, the dark sky faded as the morning sun slowly began to rise. Over at the Mount Hua dormitories, several disciples walked through the corridors. Joe Gull was pacing restlessly, wondering why Chung Myung was taking so long. His friend tried to calm him, pointing out the kid was no fool. He would return sooner or later, assuming he had not caused major trouble. Suddenly, quick footsteps approached outside, and the sliding door flew wide open. Chung Myung entered with a dead-serious expression, asking if everything was okay. The boys quickly shut the door to talk, demanding to know what happened. Chung Myung acted totally casual, mentioning he actually got treated pretty well. He even scored some brand new clothes, smirking slightly while adjusting his robes. Deep down, however, his mind was still on that strange drunkard. He felt massive relief escaping unrecognized, but here is the absolute kicker. His legendary plum blossom techniques were completely forgotten by the modern world. They no longer represented the sect like in his past life. Joe Gull approached. He demanded to know what Chung Myung was doing outside the temple. Chung Myung just smiled, telling him it was nothing a kid should know. Joe Gull snapped right back. Chung Myung was also literally just a kid. Ignoring him entirely, he changed the subject and ordered everyone to gather. Joe Gull gasped, shocked they were expected to train after such a night. Chung Myung shot his senior a very serious look, speaking quite firmly. No matter the weather, they cannot afford to miss a single day of training. From now on, that is an absolute rule. Surprisingly, Joe Gull agreed enthusiastically. He offered to gather everyone now, but Chung Myung stopped him. Skipping today's session was his only choice. He had another critical task to handle, the other senior side. Without their leader, the senior grumbled that progress would just crawl. Regardless, the two seniors finally headed out, telling him to stay safe. Left alone, he collapsed onto his bed and let out a tired sigh. Staring blankly up at the ceiling, he tried to plan his next move. All of the sect's valuable businesses were stolen from them long ago, and all the proof of ownership was burned by the demonic cult. He briefly considered just assassinating all the corrupt merchants who took them. But that would only bring endless trouble and ruin Mount Hua's reputation. A clever justification was his only way to clear the debt. But where, he had absolutely no clue, so he just tossed and turned. Nothing. As he searched his brain for a way out, a sudden memory surfaced. Jang Moon, his old master, was writing in some secret ancient ledger. Ledgers quickly hiding them away whenever he walked into the room. This got him thinking. Maybe those were just a fraction of the real records, if the sect owned so many businesses. It made perfect sense for other ledgers to be scattered around. Suddenly, his heart paced. What if they hid the rest somewhere else, perhaps tucked away in a highly classified repository, a secret chamber accessible only to the sect leader? He recalled old rumors about such a place. If it actually existed, it had to be built right near the leader's residence. His thoughts spinning, the boy began to scratch his head, trying to narrow down the spots. Maybe it lay in the hills just behind the house where old martial masters once lived, or perhaps it was some subterranean cave. A sly smile began to creep onto his face. This was turning into a proper treasure hunt. No time to waste. He bolted up, flung the window open, and threw himself outside. He silently asked his master for forgiveness for trespassing on sacred ground, but saving their home came first. Armed with a simple tool to assist his search, the boy sprinted across the rooftops, a grin plastered on his face. Then a strange blue light flared over the peaks just before Chung Myung dropped to his knees. Utterly spent, scouring an entire mountain was proving to be a brutal task, and he would drop dead from sheer fatigue if he kept going, pushing his weary body past its absolute limits. He struggled to concentrate, pooling all of his internal energy deep inside. Suddenly, a glowing blue orb manifested and began to pulse intensely between his hands. Straining under the weight, he slammed the concentrated blast down, hoping the shockwave would locate the empty cavern he was desperately searching for. Even without any solid proof, he kept striking. Something had to be hidden here. Multiple attempts later, he was left gasping for air and completely drained. Realizing he might be looking in the wrong area, sprawled out on the grass. With zero energy left, he stared blankly at the sky, but his stubborn nature took over one last try, and then something changed. His internal energy rippled outward like a lone drop in a quiet sea, bringing back a clear reaction. His hard work was finally paying off. The earth itself seemed to dip, sucking his energy straight down. A sudden surge of pure adrenaline hit him. He had actually found the spot. Summoning his absolute last reserve of strength, the boy started digging like crazy, determined to see the truth for himself. A few minutes in, his fingertips scraped against a solid surface. Chung Myung instantly knew he had hit a brick wall. His chest pounded. This had to be the secret vault of the Mount Hua sect. Gently, he wiggled one of the clay bricks out of the wall and peered inside, spotting a pitch-black hallway that proved him right. But then something made him freeze. He was not alone. Wait, is that footsteps echoing from down the dark corridor, slowly getting louder? Chung Myung watched in absolute silence, straining his eyes to identify the shadowy figure. He soon recognized a tall man with flowing hair and a thick beard walking calmly through the shadows. It was the sect leader himself, meaning he also knew this secret place. The leader stopped right in front of a massive iron door, pushing it open with his fingertips. But something was terribly wrong. Chung Myung's eyes went wide as he stared at the door is covered in deep scratches, as if someone tried to claw it open countless times. Even worse, the sect leader's hand was not firm at all, but trembling with hesitation. Watching this, Chung Myung finally understood the truth. This was not a display of power, but the desperate stance of a man facing a harsh reality. His sect was crumbling, its martial arts weakening, and its fortune vanishing. It must have been torture to watch the place he built with his own hands slowly fall apart, yet he bore that massive burden entirely alone, because a true leader never shows weakness to anyone. Later, just as the morning sun began to rise, Chung Myung finally finished clearing the bricks and making a gap wide enough to enter. He drops straight down into the dark corridor, landing without a single sound, totally alert. Looking around the cold, empty space, his mind starts to race. He wonders if he played a part in this decline, but quickly shakes it off. There is still time to rewrite their destiny, and he knows that opening the gate right here is the first real step. He walks up, slowly placing his hand flat against the metal while drawing power from his core straight into his palm. The very moment they touch, a massive burst of energy explodes outward, sending a violent shockwave that whips his hair wildly. Chung Myung stumbles backward in sheer disbelief as his own force is thrown right back. That is when he realizes what this gate is made of. It is forged from perpetual metal, a legendary, indestructible material. Suddenly, it all makes sense. No wonder the last leader could not even dent it and had zero chance of forcing it open. But wait, something does not add up. If the old masters actually got inside, there had to be a trick. Some hidden key. Chung Myung moves closer, placing his hands back on the freezing surface, his eyes scanning the bizarre, uneven lines marked all over. These are definitely not accidental dents or wear and tear. As he focuses his gaze, he instantly recognizes the unique marks carved by their own plum blossom sword style. He deciphers them step by step, identifying the sword of equilibrium, the bamboo leaf, and the 24 deadly movements, ending with the plum blossom itself. It is a secret sequence meant to unlock the door. He finally gets it. By performing the techniques in the precise sequence, the heavy gate will swing open. But there is one massive catch. His fragile new body lacks the strength to pull off the whole thing. This would be a joke in his past life, but today, it is a massive wall. Chung Myung scratches his head, thoroughly annoyed. Knowing there has to be a way, he presses his hand to his abdomen, feeling the deep pool of energy inside and makes a risky call. He will go far beyond his limits. The blue light in his core begins to shift, turning a deep purple as it wraps around him. This is the Kai of innate truth, his actual life force, something he should never tap into lightly. But there is no other choice left. If he does not do this now, everything ends. Right here, his blade takes on a purple glow, starting to radiate that immense power. Chung Myung takes a slow breath, already feeling the heavy toll of burning his very life force. He knew there was only one shot at this, zero room for error. Shoving all doubt aside, the young warrior stepped forward, one slow pace at a time. He started swinging his sword in perfect, coordinated sweeps, ignoring how his aching body screamed in absolute agony. His hand shook violently against the hilt, but his sheer determination completely eclipsed his physical limits, planting his feet heavily on the cold floor. He cleared his mind and unleashed the sword of equilibrium, flowing right into the stance of the bamboo leaf. Then he smoothly transitioned into the 24 movements, and his entire body erupted in blinding pain. The crushing pressure was immense, but stopping was impossible. He was the plum blossom sword saint, and if anyone could break this seal, it was him. Finally, he delivered the final, decisive strike, his body reeling under the brutal backlash of pushing past his limits. The massive door reacted instantly, the deep sword marks carved into its metal face began to burn with light, and Chung Myung watched closely to see if he had actually succeeded. Strange energy pulsed across the metal, shining far brighter than before, with the core of the seals burning with his raw effort. Chung Myung could only stare, a tiny spark of hope rising in his chest, knowing how devastating it would be to fall short at the very end. But then, a heavy grinding sound snapped his gaze straight back to the metal. A tiny, stubborn crack that had refused to budge before was finally starting to widen. The unbreakable metal was actually opening, a total miracle. He did it, a genuine grin spread across his tired face, though it quickly vanished as blinding pain racked his exhausted frame. He stumbled, his legs nearly giving out after pushing himself past every sensible limit. He was definitely going to pay a heavy price for this. Probably unable to walk for a week, still the young man forced himself to stand upright and steady his shaking stance, keeping a tight grip on his blade. He wiped his face quickly, a wave of cold determination replacing his pained expression. Panting heavily, he smiled, knowing that the hard part was over and it was time to uncover the ancient secrets hidden inside. He reached out and pushed the massive door, which gave way easily without the slightest resistance. Stepping inside, Chung Myung looked around a dark, dusty little storeroom. The space was tiny, far smaller than expected, housing only 3 simple shelves. Honestly, it made sense, since forging a vault this size from celestial metal would demand crazy resources that only the absolute largest sects could ever afford. He remembered how their former leader always grumbled about being completely broke, and realized all their funds went right here. Chung Myung walked over, picked up one of the dusty books, and examined the cover closely. His eyes went wide upon reading the title, and he eagerly started flipping through the pages. These were the actual accounting ledgers he needed so badly. The old leader had secretly copied the original files directly from the Finance Guild, absolutely unable to hide his delight. Chung Myung snatched up the records, knowing those corrupt merchants had absolutely nowhere left to hide. Shoving the heavy ledgers into his robes, he stopped and scanned the room, thinking this vault was way too heavily fortified just to hide simple papers. He wished there was some gold here to rebuild his beloved sect, but dismissed it, deciding he was probably hoping for too much. Shaking his head, he approaches the second shelf, picking up a green-covered book and flipping through it with curiosity. He soon realizes it contains secret martial arts techniques that have never been used, techniques the sect had long since forgotten and abandoned. Looking closer, Chung Myung understands that the old leader simply couldn't bring himself to discard them, choosing instead to preserve a piece of their history. If the first shelf represented duty, this second one represented emotional attachment. Closing the book slowly, Chung Myung thinks to himself that the old leader no longer needs to worry. He will bring the sect back and make it stronger than ever before. His gaze sweeps across the room, landing on a single, isolated scroll. Chung Myung approaches it carefully and unrolls it, his eyes tracing the words written by the former leader himself. The message is clear. If someone is reading this, it means the next sect leader has been chosen. The old leader explains that the role of the Mount Hua sect leader is not just to guide, but to protect and motivate, allowing each member to follow their own path. He states that leader must abandon the idea of control. The sect is built on will and spirit, things that cannot be tamed. The message concludes by asking the next leader to preserve this essence, placing a heavy weight of responsibility on whoever reads these words. It was signed by the 21st leader of the sect, Chung Myung. Chung Myung silently puts the scroll away, thinking with mild disdain that the old leader really loved to overcomplicate things. He glances around, deciding that while he might not have understood everything, he has what he needs. The accounting books are the most important prize, since they will let him reclaim everything that was taken from the sect. Just as he is about to leave, something bothers him. He scans the room again, a nagging feeling that something is off. His eyes narrow as a peculiar memory surfaces. The leader he knew was totally obsessed with symmetry, and honestly, that empty third shelf looks extremely out of place. Driven by suspicion, Chung Myung approaches the shelf and runs his hand over it, analyzing every single detail. Making a quick decision, he grips the massive piece of furniture and pulls with all his might, sliding it to reveal a hidden secret. Just as he suspected, a secret passage is concealed right behind the shelf. His eyes widen in disbelief. The passage is barely large enough for one person to squeeze through. Without hesitation, he enters and descends, freezing right in place at the sight. The hidden room is packed with treasures, stacked gold bars, and the rarest swords he has ever seen, unknown jewels, and even more secret books. His eyes gleam with a mix of greed and satisfaction as he realizes it is worth an absolute fortune. Chung Myung thinks to himself that he is now incredibly rich. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the current sect leader is watching the sunrise as the sky slowly brightens. He sighs, deeply contemplating his predicament. While it might be a beautiful day for some, for him it is just another day of worry. With only 5 days left before meeting with the owner of the Kong Pavilion, suddenly an urgent shout breaks the silence. Someone was shouting his name, desperately. The leader quickly threw his door open. There stood his disciple, Gum, looking utterly panicked. He promised he would explain everything on the run, but they had to leave, right now. Seeing the deep worry written on Gum's face, the leader quickly agreed. They set off, sprinting through the dense woods. The leader spotted bodies lying scattered on the ground. It looked like a battlefield. Shocked, he asked what happened, but Gum shrugged. Just the kids training again. They slowed down as they reached their target destination, finding Chung Myung hunched over a pile of old books. Gum called out to him. The boy answered lazily. The leader looked closer. His jaw dropped instantly. The kid looked in a truly deplorable, ruined state. Completely drained, like he had not slept in days. Yet Chung Myung just brushed it off, pointing instead to a mysterious wooden box. The leader hesitated. Surely nothing was more urgent than a walking zombie. Still, he looked where the kid pointed. The moment his eyes landed on the object, a sudden blinding light struck him, a glorious gleam radiated pure golden magnificence. The wind even started whipping their hair. As Chung Myung flashed a smug, knowing grin, before them lay an absolutely massive, glittering, unbelievable pile of pure gold. The leader stammered, asking how this was even possible, but the kid just shrugged. Classic Chung Myung, right? But the gold was only the start. Deep inside that chest lay an even more jaw-dropping secret. The ancient sect records. They were so precious that the leader's hands began to tremble violently as he reached out. He froze. A single reckless move could lead to eternal regret, so he grabbed his own wrist tightly to steady his shaking. His eyes then locked onto a peculiar, green-covered book in the pile. He had a strong feeling about its contents. His hand shook wildly as he picked it up. His expression changed instantly. Flipping through the pages, his cheeks flushed red. His eyes widened like he was witnessing the ultimate miracle of life. The shock was simply too much. His heart gave out and he collapsed backward, leaving Gum in a panic. Sometime later, he finally woke. He bolted upright, shouting that he had seen the 7 records of the plum blossom sword techniques. Only then did he realize he was in a bed. Immediately, he started yelling, asking if they brought that precious wooden chest, demanding they summon Hung Young, the head of their finance department. A short while later, Hung Young arrived and began inspecting the records. With a face full of pure joy, he confirmed that all the Books were completely genuine. He added that they also found government verification. Papers beneath the treasure, proving the absolute authenticity of the ledger. With this evidence, they could immediately reclaim their lost provincial businesses. The sect leader let out a massive, emotional sigh of relief at the incredible news. His mind immediately went to the kid responsible for all of this, marveling at how accepting that child brought such prosperity. That boy was truly the ultimate good luck charm for the Mount Hua sect. With the accounts finally verified, the merchant leader knew it was time to face his debts. With a booming shout, he ordered his men to gather everyone tied to the business books of the Huom province. Days later, the focus shifts to the steep mountain paths of the Mount Hua sect. Pavilion leader Kong, leading a group of other merchants, slowly struggles up the rough trail. Looking back, he urges them to keep moving, promising they are almost there. But keep in mind, one of those completely exhausted merchants is quietly swearing that the moment he gets his cash back, he will never step foot on this brutal mountain again, wheezing out that he hates this place. Along the way, another merchant curiously asks their leader why the sect master summoned them so out of the blue. The man in front replies that hundreds of thousands of nyongs is no small sum to produce on short notice, guessing that the desperate leader wants to beg for mercy. After all, there is absolutely no way anyone could gather that much silver so fast. So stalling all the way to the official deadline makes absolutely zero sense to them. Hearing this, another annoyed merchant mutters that this whole trip will be incredibly humiliating if they drag themselves up here just to hear cheap excuses. Meanwhile, the exhausted traveler worries they might leave empty-handed despite all this agonizing effort. And the stakes are getting higher by the second. The presence of a scout from the Southern Edge sect shows rivals are keeping a close watch. On the Mount Hua temple, finally, after a grueling hike, the travelers arrive. Standing right before the massive sect gate, a deep wave of guilt hits them. They are about to squeeze the very institution that has protected this district. For generations, they know all too well that if the leader cannot pay, their beloved Mount Hua will collapse in less than 7 days, but hard business is business. The drive to collect their debts pushes them inside. A disciple approaches the entrance to greet the anxious merchants who are waiting for their money. Bowing deeply, he welcomes them and says that the sect master is already expecting them, guiding the group inside. Once they enter, the leader studies them with an incredibly calm and quiet expression. A heavy silence settles over the room because nobody has the guts to speak first, breaking the ice. Pavilion leader Kong bows deeply to show respect. In return, the sect master welcomes them warmly, thanking them for the long climb. Merchant leader answers back that although they are incredibly busy men of business, they could never compare to a powerful sect leader, making this invite an honor. It is an honor, just as the sect master starts politely offering them some warm tea. The guest abruptly cuts him off. The businessman explains that because they are simple, practical merchants, they should completely skip the dry formalities and get right down to business. Observing this attitude, the master offers a faint smile, admitting he might be a little inconsiderate. He then gets real, announcing that the actual reason for this meeting is to share how the Mount Hua sect stands regarding their outstanding debts. He calmly explains that despite reaching out to many contacts and factions, he simply could not find a single soul willing to lend him money. Consequently, he will fail to settle his massive debt before the official deadline. Hearing this, the head merchant stumbles back in absolute shock and immediately claims they have already given the sect more than enough time. He reminds everyone that as businessmen living on profit, extensions are impossible. But the sect leader just smiles. That is exactly why he brought it up. He explains that while paying the total amount right now is impossible, they can definitely clear at least a portion of what they owe. So he makes a request: if anyone here is willing to wait, they should show some mercy and postpone their deadline. Then, with a deep bow, he sincerely begs for their favor, leaving the merchants completely stunned. The mood instantly drops, heavy, awkward, and dead quiet. A suffocating silence fills the room as things take a bizarre turn. Watching from the back, Chung Myung smirks with a devious grin. So this is how the old man plans to play it. But he still cannot tell if this is a genuine plea or a trap. Is he getting rid of them or just playing mind games? Either way, Chung Myung knows one thing for sure: Hyen Jong is no fool. True leaders need patience, and though Mount Hua is a peaceful place, their martial roots mean they know how to make sharp moves. Chung Myung wonders if the old man really has the chops to lead. Suddenly, the head merchant breaks the silence, reiterating his firm stance. He states clearly that there is absolutely no way he can extend the deadline. But Hyun-jong calmly notes that his request is not meant for him. He explains that although the entire debt is hundreds of thousands of nyongs, he actually owes smaller, individual amounts to everyone sitting in this room, which changes the game entirely. Now he asks if anyone is willing to step up. Will anyone here show some generosity and grant them a bit more time? Pavilion leader Kong scowls, realizing the old man is playing dirty. He asks directly if the sect can immediately pay off those who refuse. Calmly, Hyun-jong responds that even though they are currently struggling, it does not mean the great Mount Hua is completely helpless. While they cannot produce the whole sum today, they can cover parts of it. They will fully pay off anyone who refuses to show them any mercy. Another merchant steps forward with a frown, questioning the offer. If they accept the extension, what actual guarantee do they have of getting paid? Hyun-jong nods without hesitation, but the merchant quickly fires back. He points out the obvious risk: Mount Hua could easily collapse overnight. Everyone in the room agrees. If the sect dies, verbal promises mean nothing. Staring hard at the sect leader, the merchant asks a brutal question. What is the point of accepting a deal with zero collateral? Hyun-jong lets out a slow, calm sigh and looks him in the eyes. He says their only collateral is the legendary name of Mount Hua and its proud history. And that alone should be more than enough. Suddenly, Kong bursts out laughing. His mocking laughter fills the room, but Chung Myung just watches in silence. He looks on with pure contempt as the merchant continues his laughing fit. Kong mockingly asks if the sect leader has completely lost his mind. Hyun-jong locks eyes with him, asking with absolute seriousness if that is truly what he meant. He presses him further, demanding answers. Who would dare treat Mount Hua so lightly, ignoring centuries of legacy? History actually matters, Hyun-jong continues, reminding them that Mount Hua has carried its proud spirit through countless generations, spreading its roots deep across this region. He believes they must all reflect on what the sect truly means. Silence falls. Pavilion leader Kong stops laughing. With a cold, sharp tone, Kong makes a proposal, pointing to the right. Stand over there to extend the payment deadline. Stay put if you refuse. But he makes one thing brutally clear to those who choose to wait. They lose all protection from the alliance, even if they never get back a single coin of what they are owed. Now Kong demands they make their final choice. The ultimatum throws the entire crowd into absolute chaos. You can see the pure panic as they hesitantly scratch their necks. Deeply uncomfortable, but absolutely nobody dares to make a move. Seeing this, a smug smile spreads across the leader's face. Spreading his arms, Kong declares this to be the final result. No one is willing to wait, but before he can even finish speaking, a lone figure steps out. It is the owner of the U store. Dressed in green, he walks to the right with total determination. Hyun-jong watches closely, while Kong instantly loses his temper. He furiously demands to know what the hell the merchant thinks he is doing. The store owner calmly tells him not to glare. He admits his decision might look incredibly stupid, but he has a very personal reason for it. He reminds Kong that he is not originally from Hua. Because of that, he probably never understood what Mount Hua means to them. He explains that everyone raised in this region grows up hearing stories. Kids are constantly encouraged to join up and become powerful warriors. This dream shapes the childhood of every single person born here. And even as decades go by, those deep-rooted teachings remain alive inside them. Even those who quickly realized they lacked the talent to ever join the sect kept listening to legendary stories of how Mount Hua protected the helpless world. Kong lets out a contemptuous snort, cutting him off. He demands to know where this is going, but the merchant presses on. His father and grandfather lived the exact same way. He argues that for a wealthy leader like Kong, postponing a payment is no big deal. He has massive cities like Hangzhou where he can easily spend his wealth. Kong sneers back, asking if he is seriously throwing away a massive fortune. For mere sentiment, he warns him that he will deeply regret this choice. The merchant admits he spent weeks anxiously waiting to get paid. He dreamed of retiring forever, and his hands are literally shaking right now. Just speaking these thoughts out loud, but he refuses to back down. But deep down, the merchant knew he already had more than enough money to survive on. Walking away without this cash would bring him only a tiny bit of regret. But if his greed caused the downfall of the Mount Hua sect, that guilt would haunt him. It would follow him all the way to his final breath. He made his choice. He refused to carry a burden that heavy, no matter how rich it would make him. Hearing this, the pavilion leader simply shrugged his shoulders and opened his arms. He mockingly claimed that one stubborn fool giving up his share wouldn't change a single thing. But out of nowhere, another voice cut in to object. He wasn't the only one. Suddenly, other merchants in the room began to step forward. One by one, they chose to follow the noble example of the U-store owner. Within minutes, 5 prominent merchants had agreed to let go of their immediate payments. The pavilion leader was completely stunned, but the sect leader, Hyunjong, kept his cool. He lowered his head with a subtle smile, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. He announced how heartened he was to see true loyalty still exists. Now watch, with the loyal ones separated, it was time to handle the greedy traitors. He ordered AM to bring it out. The disciple walked in carrying a heavy wooden box. Inside were old notebooks and records. The merchants instantly recognized them. Pavilion leader Kong felt his chest tighten. Those were the secret district accounting books. Hyunjong noted that Mount Hua had supported their families for generations. They had shown immense kindness, but in return, these merchants chose betrayal. They threw away that trust, completely ignoring their financial duties and debts. The arrogant smirk on the pavilion leader's face instantly shattered. Mocking contempt turned into pure panic. Hyunjong stomped his foot heavily onto the floor. The sect leader declared that starting today, they would go strictly by these records. The Mount Hua sect was going to seize every single one of their businesses. It would take back every last coin they owed. The greedy merchants stood frozen in terror. They stammered in shock, desperately asking if he was actually being serious. They couldn't believe they were about to lose their entire livelihoods in a single second. Pavilion leader Kong tried to play it cool, saying this was a joke taken too far. But Hyunjong fixed him with an icy stare. Did they think he had time for jokes? Slamming one of the heavy ledgers shut, Kong desperately searched for a way out. He argued there was a massive issue, demanding to know how these records could be proven. Hyunjong calmly asked if he was accusing the Mount Hua sect of forging evidence. The merchant quickly backtracked, claiming he didn't mean the sect would lie on purpose. Instead, he craftily suggested that the sect leader himself might have been tricked by fake papers. He was trying to cast doubt on the authenticity of the records. A small smile played on Hyunjong's lips. He saw right through the pathetic, desperate tactic. He told AM to bring in their next witness, the chief of the financial agency. The official entered, agreeing that confirming the book's authenticity was absolutely critical. This got the merchants excited, thinking they might actually get away with it. They quickly voiced their agreement, nodding along with desperate hope. But the official's expression hardened as he dropped a massive bombshell on the room. Hyunjong had already anticipated their desperate excuses 2 days ago. He had already sent half of the ledger copies straight to the local prefectural office. The sudden realization hit pavilion leader Kong like a devastating physical strike. It was a brutal realization if officials started seizing their shops right now. The merchants would be completely helpless. The whole thing was a trap, summoning them here just to clear the field. While they were stuck, the Mount Hua sect could reclaim everything. The pavilion leader knew it. 2 days was more than enough time to get the official records verified. With half of them already confirmed, the rest would quickly fall into place too. This meant the local soldiers were armed and simply waiting. Ready to strike, out of pure rage, he screamed the sect leader's name. But Hyunjong did not back down, shouting right back to shut him up. He had absolutely no right to scream in this sacred hall. Then, Hyunjong spoke of alliances. A real partnership means helping each other, not protecting backstabbers who threw them away. He gave them one final warning to leave immediately and head back. By the time they reached the Hua prefecture, everything would be finished. Honestly, if he wanted to be perfectly fair, he would have left them completely penniless. This small gesture of letting them keep a fraction of their wealth was pure mercy. Hearing this, the Kong Pavilion leader's face twisted into an ugly mask of pure hatred. It looked like he aged 10 years in a single second, overcome by despair. Vowing never to forget this insult, he had no other option. Turning on his heel, he walked out and left the furious merchants behind. Dead silence, nobody dared breathe. Then Hyeon-jong turned to the loyalists. He reminded those who stayed that their shops technically always belonged to Mount Hua anyway. So naturally, these shops would return to the sect. Even so, they would still run the shops and keep the earnings. On top of that, he wanted to offer them a brand new deal. A partnership that would make both sides rich, so he invited them all inside. The old owner of the used store watched quietly, his mind racing. Sure, he was better off than the traders, but his whole life had just flipped. He went from being a proud, independent business owner to a glorified middle manager. A heavy sigh escaped him as deep regret suddenly washed over him. His grandfather's old lessons echoed in his head. Meanwhile, Chung Myung was absolutely boiling mad over what the sect leader just did. How could those filthy traders be allowed to keep a single copper coin? Leaping down from a rooftop, he muttered in total frustration. Who does that old man think he is, giving away Mount Hua's hard-earned money? You can practically feel the misery radiating from their caravan as it rolls down the road. Merchants stared blankly at the meager belongings they managed to save from the wreck. It quickly became clear that guards had already locked down their shops. If the sect leader had not shown them mercy, they would have been ruined. Now the bitter reality set in, and all eyes turned to the Kong Pavilion leader. They deeply regretted trusting him. One angry merchant stepped forward to confront him. He demanded to know why they trusted his promises in the first place. You told us everything would be fine, he barked. The pavilion leader glared back. With a cold glare, he asked if they were blaming him for everything. The merchant flinched. The leader suddenly dropped his cart and faced his accuser. He snapped that they should not lose hope just yet, because this was not over. It was only a temporary setback. He was convinced those accounting books were fake, forged by the sect leader himself, but another merchant argued that the documents were officially validated by the prefectural office. Still, the pavilion leader insisted it was a total setup, concluding their best move was to retreat to the city of Luoyang and find support from higher authorities there. Suddenly, a strange voice cuts in, making everyone spin around in shock. There stands Chung Myung, dressed head to toe in stealthy black gear. The pavilion leader narrows his eyes, demanding to know if he just spoke. Chung Myung lets out a little cough, pointing out nobody else is around. The man stares at this kid, who looks like a daylight robber, yet somehow carries himself like an incredibly experienced old master. Assuming the kid wants their fortune, the leader warns him to walk away. Before he ends up dead, Chung Myung just laughs, asking if they honestly think he came for cash. An irritated spark flashes in his eyes. As he explains, he is not here to steal, but to take his own property. That statement instantly tells the leader, this boy belongs to Mount Hua. Perfect, it is the absolute best time for some payback, but before he can order an attack, several warriors surround them, without any hesitation. They rush straight at Chung Myung with swords drawn, facing them alone. The boy does not flinch, zero fear, he just looks at them calmly. In a flash, he leaps high, dodges every single attack with total ease. Before they can even blink, he is right in their faces. He swings his scabbard, smacking one guy across the face. A sharp kick drops another, while a third gets struck on the neck. And knocked cold, his speed is insane. Honestly, they never stood a chance. Within mere seconds, every opponent is eating dirt. He slowly walks over to the stunned pavilion leader, warning him that defying Mount Hua has a price. The leader is visibly shaken. How can someone this powerful still exist? In that ruined sect, he quickly orders his remaining men to stand down. Looking directly at the boy, he admits that if such a warrior appeared, earlier Mount Hua would not have fallen, but now it is far too late, and he will pay for this intrusion with his very life. He vows to kill the kid and deliver his body back as a warning. Channeling a massive surge of energy, the leader readies his lethal stance. Chung Myung simply watches, remarking that he knew this guy was hiding something. His moves are clearly way beyond those of some average innkeeper, yet the boy does not care, offering one final casual warning: he will try not to break his jaw too badly, since he still needs answers later. The loud shockwaves of their clash soon echo deep through the dense forest. The leader focuses all his internal energy directly into his hands. He knows the golden rule is to never underestimate any opponent, remembering that even a tiger uses its absolute maximum power to hunt. After watching this masked punk dismantle his entire squad so easily, the leader has no intention of holding anything back, and yet, his opponent looks entirely bored, which only makes him absolutely furious. Determined to wipe that smug look off the masked man's face, the leader goes all out. Summoning his energy, the pavilion leader lunges forward with his fists glowing purple. Enveloped in a strange purple aura, but Chung Myung remains completely unfazed. With flawless precision, the young man parries every single attack with just the tip of his sheathed sword. The leader tries to press his attack, but senses something weird. The strange force pulls at his skin. Suddenly, a sharp pain shoots right through his arm. He retreats immediately, his big attack shut down before it can even land. The built-up energy flows backward, causing even more severe damage. With a look of pure disdain, Chung Myung remarks that the man is far too slow. He advises him to stop. If he continues, those fingers are breaking first. Furious at the disrespect, the pavilion leader quickly shifts his strategy. He channels all his power into his leg, launching a massive spinning kick instead. A fierce wave of energy slices right through the air, exploding with a loud bang in the distance. But it never hits its target because Chung Myung is absolutely nowhere to be found. He easily appears right behind the leader, raising his sheathed sword once again. The instant he touches the scabbard, the agonizing pain returns. This time, the pain returns with even more terrifying intensity. Chung Myung issues another cold warning, reminding him that those fingers will surely break if he continues. Overcome by the sudden, intense pain, the leader drops to his knees. The kid in front of him does not look exceptionally strong or lightning fast. His plain appearance is honestly not impressive in the slightest. Normally, a seasoned martial artist should easily crush 10 guys like him. But absolutely nothing makes sense because even while giving it everything, he cannot land a blow. Notice how effortlessly he dodges. Chung Myung always moves in the perfect direction. He maintains the absolute perfect distance, wasting zero effort, as if reading every single move. Predicting every strike proves he is no ordinary martial artist. He is an absolute, immeasurably dangerous monster. Suddenly, Chung Myung pauses and casually suggests they wrap this little fight up. He admits playing around is fun, but his patience has limits. Exhausted and panting, the pavilion leader can barely speak. He asks why an absolute powerhouse like him never helped the Mount Hua sect before. Heavy silence falls between them as the young protagonist refuses to give an immediate answer. He merely spins his sword, rests it on his shoulder, and tilts his head. Then he coldly asks why he is even obligated to answer a question like that. He says guys like him live trapped in illusions. There is absolutely no reason to satisfy his curiosity. Besides, he should be the one asking questions, given the man's refined techniques. Those skills are far too advanced for someone claiming to be a simple innkeeper. The leader snaps back. Martial artists can run a business. Chung Myung nods, but points out that with highly advanced skills like those, there are far more profitable ways to make a living. Before the leader can even respond, Chung Myung raises a hand, silencing him. He assures him there is no grand conspiracy or secret agenda going on here. With no orders from anyone, the pavilion leader claims he already figured. Had not received orders from anyone, and the pavilion leader already left. He figured as much, and Chung Myung notes everyone thinks the same. Pointing a finger at the man, he says he wants one final question. Specifically, what happens when Chung Myung decides to squeeze out information. As he slowly clenches his fist, his entire demeanor undergoes a chilling shift. Then, without a single hesitation, the young swordsman states that to get answers, he simply destroys his target. Hearing this, the pavilion leader's eyes narrow with deep, growing concern. Chung Myung explains that prying answers from someone tight-lipped is just a waste. Instead, he offers a much simpler arrangement for the stubborn man. The prisoner guarantees silence, and in return, Chung Myung guarantees a brutal beating. A little physical compensation to satisfy his own curiosity. The pavilion leader tracks the movement, bracing for a strike to his left knee. At that speed, he calculates that a block is still highly possible. But at the very last second, the sheath shifts its trajectory midair. The heavy sheath slams into his shoulder with bone-shattering force. Blinding pain blurs his vision as he struggles to track his opponent. He senses a sharp, invisible line of energy slicing through the air. Sure that he can predict the next move, the merchant braces to defend. He guards his face, but he is dead wrong. the sheath changes position instantly. A violent blow strikes his neck, knocking all the air right out of him. Desperate and gasping for breath, the merchant clutches his bruised throat. He saw the attack coming with his own eyes, yet evasion was impossible. Giving him zero time to recover, Chung Myung presses the brutal assault. He advances relentlessly, delivering one heavy strike after another. The pavilion leader realizes that if this keeps up, he will die. One look into those cold eyes proves he is facing a seasoned killer. Then Chung Myung slowly begins to draw the blade from its sheath. The sight confirms his worst nightmare as his life hangs by a thread. Completely powerless, the man falls to his knees, trembling with pure terror. Chung Myung approaches with slow, heavy steps, preparing for the final blow. In a last-ditch effort, the terrified pavilion leader screams out. He instinctively throws his hands up to shield his face from the strike. Suddenly, an explosion of blue energy shatters the quiet forest. As the dust slowly settles, the surrounding trees come back into focus. The merchant's hand is trembling violently from the sheer impact. A faint spark of blue energy still dances on his shaking fingertips. He stares in total shock, probably wondering how on earth he survived. That move was the legendary Taiji, Divine Palm technique. Kneeling nearby, Chung Myung watches him closely, his eyes burning with intense crimson. He coldly asks if the merchant belongs to the Southern Edge sect. Following his train of thought, Chung Myung remarks that it is no coincidence. He is now absolutely certain that the pavilion leader belongs to that sect. Stepping even closer, he glares down and demands the absolute truth. He asks directly if the Southern Edge sect sent him here. Cornered, the merchant realizes the fatal mistake of revealing his signature technique. He stood before a monster from Mount Hua. Now he had to face the consequences. Even if it cost him his life, he should have kept that skill hidden. The pavilion leader realized that if this crazy kid had not suddenly drawn his sword. He panicked. He had no clue how far ahead the kid planned. Chung Myung had planned every single move from the start. Meanwhile, the boy slowly stood up, thinking the merchant's stubborn silence was almost respectable in a way. But Chung Myung knew better than to underestimate the powerful Southern Edge sect. A massive group like that would never act without a cold, calculated plan. Letting out a heavy sigh, Chung Myung looked down at him with pure contempt. Even in the darkest times, the martial arts world had some basic honor. It was pathetic to watch one of the 10 great sects sink this low to steal. Resorting to such cheap, dirty tricks, the pavilion leader had absolutely nothing to say. He simply closed his eyes. Still, he tried to squeeze out one final argument. He asked if this was not actually better for the struggling Mount Hua sect anyway. There was no hope left for them, since their legendary techniques were long gone. They were already destined to fade away and be completely forgotten by the world. Chung Myung listened with a cold, mocking look and immediately shut him down. He flatly denied it, stating that Mount Hua had never lost its true arts. When the man kept arguing, the boy's gaze hardened with absolute certainty. "No way," his voice rising, he scolded the trembling, terrified man. "Do not spread brainless rumors without knowing the actual facts first. Most of those lies only existed because people desperately wanted to see them fail." He remembered crushing members of that rival sect back in his past life. When two massive rival schools exist side by side, one is bound to fall. The merchant suddenly screamed out, claiming he had nothing to do with Southern Edge. Chung Myung smirked, replying that he did not belong to Mount Hua either. That is when the entire mood shifted, and the air grew freezing cold. The entire atmosphere grew heavy and cold as ice. A little trade for whatever he knew about the Taiji Divine Palm. The merchant tried to scramble back, but a razor-sharp blade blocked his path. Chung Myung whispered that it would be a shame to miss the final show. His eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty, demonic red as he made his demand. "Tell me exactly what you reported to the master who sent you here." Chung Myung firmly gripped his sword with both hands. The cold steel rested right against the terrified pavilion leader's neck. Suddenly, the boy's arm blurred at a speed that defied human eyes. The sheer wind from his strikes was powerful enough to knock the man over. Without even taking a step forward, Chung Myung unleashed a mountain of pressure. Yet not a single physical cut actually touched the merchant's skin. Calmly, the genius explained that plum blossoms shine brightest in freezing snow. Even in the dead of winter, the unbreakable spirit of Mount Hua survives. With a sharp, elegant swing, he cut right through the freezing night air. A flash, he passed his opponent like a bolt of lightning. He whispered that everything was going to change when spring finally arrived. The lingering sword trail began to glow, and the stunned leader could only watch. He drops his hands. Suddenly, the entire world around him completely transforms. His eyes widen in pure shock as he sees the mountain covered in thousands of blooming plum blossoms drifting right from Chung Myung's sword. They fall endlessly from the sky, leaving the man completely paralyzed and hypnotized as if he is staring at a literal divine miracle. As they fall, the world around him is dyed a deep red until he finally understands. This technique is so much bigger than a simple show of blooming flowers. It is the 24 plum blossom movement, the legendary plum blossom fall, absolutely insane. Unable to process the legendary sight, his knees buckle. Chung Myung sheathes his sword. With a sharp click, and instantly, the pavilion leader collapses straight to the ground, utterly defeated. But Chung Myung did not escape completely unscathed either, as his own body grows dangerously weak. He knows that pushing himself like this is literal suicide, because a move that used to be incredibly easy for him has now drained almost every drop of his internal energy. Suddenly, the boy senses a presence nearby. He turns his head fast and calls out to the hiding intruder, a terrified merchant crouching in the shadows. With a nod, Chung Myung waves him over, only to realize there are actually several other men who had been watching the entire fight from afar. Crossing his arms, he casually asks who wants a beating before they leave. When nobody speaks, he asks who wants to walk away in one piece. Instantly, everyone raises their hands, begging him to just let them go. Chung Myung nods, amused, and praises their cooperation, but the second he stops talking, they all turn and run for their lives. He does not even move, just watching them flee. Before tossing out a single cold command to freeze, instantly they stop dead. Not daring to take another step, he asks if they actually have any brains, since there is no way he can pull all these heavy carts by himself. He then orders them to report the exact amount of money in each cart. One by one, the terrified merchants obey, listing the totals while Chung Myung listens. In complete silence, after a few moments of thought, he opens his eyes with a clear decision. He commands one merchant to head to the city of Zhenjiang to exchange everything for clean, untraceable cash. Chung Myung issues a chilling warning. If he finds out they tried to double-cross him, they are all dead men. One of the men, shaking, asks what happens if the messenger to Zhenjiang never returns. With a cold, mocking laugh, Chung Myung shoots back, what exactly are they going to do if they run away, since they will have zero cash and nothing but a few stolen carts? He concludes that to get their fair share, they will have to return. Another merchant slowly raises his hand and asks what if they report him to the local authorities. Instead of replying, Chung Myung simply lifts his leg and slams his foot straight into the ground, shattering the earth with an insane shockwave. A loud boom echoes through the forest, scattering the birds. Only then does Chung Myung warn them that they can certainly try, but they better run to the other side of the continent, because he will hunt them down wherever they hide. A heavy silence falls. Yeah, there is definitely no escaping this monster. So they quickly fall in line and obey under Chung Myung's watchful eye. Sometime later, the main character holds a fat wad of cash, sniffing it with absolute satisfaction. His eyes gleam as a wide grin spreads across his face. Without wasting a moment, he dashes toward a wall, leaps over it effortlessly, and heads off to stash his brand new fortune. Down by the banks of a crystal-clear river, Joe Gull is busy wringing out his wet robe. All around him, the other disciples are also washing their clothes, endlessly complaining about how brutal and exhausting the day's training actually was. Watching them all with a quiet smile, Joe Gull feels a genuine sense of satisfaction. He notices a real change in himself and his companions. They finally look like a legitimate group of martial artists. Just then, senior disciple Yoon Jong approaches. Asking him what he is smiling about, Joe Gull stares at the river for a brief moment, before admitting that they finally feel like actual, dedicated practitioners. It is a pretty strange thing to say, considering they always technically have been. To his absolute surprise, the senior shakes his head and admits he feels the exact same way, which actually makes Joe Gull burst out laughing. Just a few short days ago, none of them could have ever imagined training this hard at Mount Hua. Back then, they just killed time, because real training was never part of their daily routine. But everything changed when Chung Myung arrived, the sole person responsible for this entire transformation. His influence still feels like a gentle breeze, but who knows if it will stay that way or soon blow up into a wild hurricane. Later, as Joe Gull walks toward another area, loud shouts and commanding orders echo through the air. Workers are running around carrying heavy timber back and forth, while a foreman yells out orders, complaining that things are in the wrong spot, snapping that he already gave clear instructions. To keep everything organized once the supplies arrived, the disciples walk up, in total confusion, trying to make sense of the chaos when they suddenly spot the great Sasuk actively running the entire operation, spotting the boys. He stares straight at them. Yoonjong takes a step forward and asks what is happening, and Sasuk grins widely, excitedly explaining that all these men are workers hired to completely rebuild the temple, a project planned for ages. After all, everyone knows the ancient structures are in desperate, urgent need of repairs. But suddenly, his cheerful tone shifts as he demands to know why they are just standing around, harshly ordering them to start helping out immediately, since the workers are exhausted from hauling lumber up the mountain. Laughing out loud, he points over to the construction site and tells them to get to work. Once the sun finally sets, dinner is served, and sitting right on the table is golden, incredibly juicy roasted chicken that makes the disciples' eyes sparkle with joy. It has been a really long time since they saw food like this, and their hunger instantly wakes up. Excitement fills the room when they realize there is plenty of meat for absolutely everyone, and lifting their chopsticks, the young men dive into the feast. The changes brought by Chung Myung are happening far quicker than anyone expected. Over dinner, the disciples talk about how they never in their wildest dreams imagined renovating their temple, eating delicious meat, and getting brand new uniforms. Talk about an upgrade. Midst the lively chatter, Yoonjong suddenly falls silent. And Joe Gull, noticing his quiet mood, asks what he is thinking about. Yoonjong replies that he is realizing how, in the end, money really does make a massive difference. Joe Gull agrees, admitting he has also caught himself thinking about that exact same thing. Suddenly having access to such a massive fortune got them talking. Yoonjong noted that the elders probably hated living in poverty too, but had no choice. Still, he had never once seen the great Sasukun gum smile like that. Joe Gull then asked his companion what they should even do from now on. Yoonjong replied with absolute conviction that the Mount Hua sect was changing fast. They had to prepare for what was coming, staring at their new uniforms. Joe Gull held the fabric, wondering what it would take for them to keep up with everything. Yoonjong pointed out that this transformation was about far more than just money. The ancient, secret martial arts manuals that were hidden away had also resurfaced. The way it happened was pure comedy, with Chung Myung pretending to stumble to accidentally reveal the chest packed with manuals and heavy gold bars. No one knew how he found it, but one thing was certain. A massive storm of change was coming. Are they even ready for it? Get left behind or adapt? Joe Gull laughed it off, telling his friend to stop worrying so much, prompting Yoonjong to chuckle along as well. He then changed the subject, asking if anyone had seen Chung Myung today. Yoonjong mentioned that the Grand Sect leader had summoned the boy earlier, so he was probably still resting in his quarters. Meanwhile, inside the main quarters, Yoonjong spoke with deep serenity. It was only right to reward those who achieved truly great things. A very tired Chung Myung asked what kind of reward he would get. Yoonjong told him to ask for absolutely anything he wanted, even a decent slice of the fortune he had brought to Mount Hua. But Chung Myung refused, claiming money was useless up on a secluded mountain. The leader smiled warmly, seeing this as a sign of true Taoist detachment. He truly believed the boy understood the deep essence of their path. In reality, Chung Myung knew the old man had nothing good to give. Plus, he had already pocketed a healthy stash of gold for himself. The leader offered an alternative, like learning a highly advanced secret technique. Once again, the stubborn Chung Myung turned the generous offer down. He claimed he respected the traditional training order set by the ancestors. Of course, deep down, he thought that was absolute garbage. He could teach these elders a million things, but he had to play dumb. To avoid raising suspicions, he thought fast and made a simple request. He wanted permission to visit the nearby Huam district whenever he pleased. The leader hesitated, explaining that leaving temple grounds violated strict rules. Such a sudden exception would definitely spark massive criticism from others. Annoyed, Chung Myung scratched his head, then a brilliant spark hit him. He stood right up, Dramatically, he claimed his body was in terrible shape. According to the physician, his delicate internal energy channels were heavily damaged. The leader nodded. Chung Myung quickly decided to push his luck. He requested some precious life pills to help restore his ruined health. The old leader sat in deep silence, then gestured to his assistants. Chung Myung watched with hopeful eyes as Hyun-jong sipped his tea. He set the cup down and declared that he would grant Chung. The sect leader gave Chung Myung permission to leave the temple grounds. His only rules were to stay in the Hwem district and take full responsibility. Chung Myung accepted, pretty confused by how rushed the old man seemed. He was practically pushing him out the door. The actual truth was incredibly simple. The sect leader did not have a single pill to give. He did not even have one for himself, so he just ended the conversation. The moment Chung Myung stepped out, the sect leader locked his door. He turned back to his two assistants, asking what they really thought of the boy. The elder Ungum spoke first, saying the young disciple definitely understood the Tao. Even though Chung Myung was still just a child, he possessed rare depth. There was a very clear, undeniable wisdom behind every single word he spoke. Ungum admitted the kid could be pretty harsh, but deemed it normal for his age. Talking to him, the boy did not feel young at all. It was not just his mature way of speaking, but something far deeper. He carried an intense, unchildish presence that was honestly hard to put into words. Hyun-jong then turned to Hyun-sang for his opinion on the matter. Scratching his head, Hyun-sang admitted he felt unqualified to judge anyone. But the leader pressed on, wanting to know if he had noticed anything unusual. Hyun-sang finally agreed that Chung Myung was not a normal child. Hearing this, Ungum smiled, glad he was not the only one who felt it. Hyun-sang noted that kids with tough pasts usually grow up pretty fast. But Chung Myung spoke with the weight of a fully grown adult. Smiling, Hyun-jong jokingly asked if he thought the boy was somehow corrupt inside. Hyun-sang quickly shook his head, denying he meant anything like that. Closing his eyes, the leader sighed, saying he fully understood their thoughts. But here is the thing. He urged them to stop because Chung Myung was still just an innocent child. Hyun-jong explained their actual purpose was to guide and teach, not exploit. Their job was to support the young boy and help him grow the right way. The two assistants bowed their heads in deep agreement with their leader. Shifting focus, Hyun-jong asked Ungum about the current construction progress. Ungum explained that the steep mountain slope made gathering timber pretty difficult. Even after cutting down local trees, they were still running very low. It was tough since the cut logs still needed days to dry. The leader sighed, asking if he was obsessing too much over the temple's looks. Just because they had finally managed to secure a bit of new funding. Ungum quickly shook his head. Hyun-jong then asked them to understand. He explained that Mount Hua desperately needed this rebuilding process. When someone makes a fresh start, they must first tidy up their surroundings. Ungum bowed deeply, agreeing that the leader was absolutely right. The leader then instructed Hyun-sang to hurry and finish his work. He had to translate their newly acquired martial arts techniques without delay. He warned him against any sloppy mistakes, as their entire future depended on it. These very techniques would shape the next generation of disciples. To end the meeting, Hyun-jong told them he was counting on their hard work. During the meeting, Hyun-sang wondered if he should mention a strange detail he noticed. The technique books looked brand new, which made absolutely no sense. They should have been at least 100 years old, but there were even fresh ink smudges. It looked as though someone had copied the texts down in a massive, hurried rush. He initially suspected a trap, but a closer look proved the techniques were genuine. It seemed a mysterious benefactor was helping the sect while hiding their true identity. Meanwhile, far away, Chung Myung was absolutely fuming. He was kicked out over a few simple pills. What an absolute joke. He got nothing in return for pausing his training to write those books. He spent hours copying martial arts manuals just to help a dying sect. Honestly, not even a beggar would willingly join this run-down place. He figured the leader lost their secret pill recipe along with all their wealth. Suddenly, the boy stopped in his tracks. This entire situation was a massive pain. He expected some backlash while channeling his purple energy, but this was ridiculous. The reality was far worse than he anticipated. His small body was not healing. His progress was incredibly slow. At this rate, full recovery would take at least 6 months. A child's body is constantly shifting, which is the prime time to build internal strength. Once that golden opportunity slips away, it is gone forever. So Chung Myung desperately needed a shortcut to regain his former strength. He only had two realistic options to restore his deep, internal energy reservoirs. He either needed to consume a rare life pill or receive direct energy transfer. But finding a master willing to sacrifice their own energy right now, nearly impossible. He fondly remembered the golden age, when life pills practically littered the sect grounds. Back then, you barely had to search to find a pile of them. This nostalgic thought triggered a very specific memory from his previous life. He used to eat legendary plum blossom pills just to cure a nasty hangover. They worked like a charm, and honestly, the thought alone made him crave alcohol. He would drink himself silly in secret, then pop a pill to stay fresh. His headache would vanish instantly. Suddenly, his face lit up. A sudden realization hit him, giving him a solid clue on where to look. He finally had a clue where those pills were, and trust me, he was not about to lose them. Chung Myung immediately bolted toward the spot, sprinting with absolute determination. He ran like his life depended on it. Sometimes, a terrible memory actually helps. Darkness settled over the forest, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight guiding him. Out of breath, the young boy stopped and looked up at a massive stone cliff. This steep precipice was infamous for being the most treacherous peak in the mountain range. Yet this dangerous cliff held a secret sanctuary only Chung Myung knew about. Because this zone was strictly off-limits, it was the perfect place to hide. He used to dodge his strict seniors here, taking quiet naps or eating forbidden meat. He briefly wondered how his senior brothers ever tolerated his mischievous behavior. He really was a handful back then, but those past regrets did not matter now. The only thing that mattered was the treasure hidden somewhere on this rugged peak. His ancient stash of legendary pills was still waiting for him up there. If he still had his old, powerful body, he could scale this in just 2 easy leaps. But now he had to scale the peak carefully without breaking his fragile new bones. He runs across the grass and comes back holding a massive, incredibly long rope. After checking out the drop, he makes his choice. Instead of climbing up, he decides to go down, which is 10 times more dangerous. Still, Chung Myung is ready to risk it, believing you only live once. Even though it is technically his second life, the young man ties the end of his rope to a sturdy tree at the edge of the cliff. Dangling over the edge, he wonders why rebuilding Mount Hua has to be this hard. The crazy steep drop is not the only reason this place is banned. People call this peak the disconnected, uneven cliff for a very good reason. There is absolutely nothing to grab or step on along these sheer walls. The moment he starts sliding down, the young cultivator immediately loses his footing. This cliff is absolutely merciless, and he immediately slips. Gravity takes over. He is held only by a single thread of rope. A desperate scream escapes him as the ground vanishes below. The cliff edge gets further and further away, and he thinks this is the end. But just as he braces for death, the line tied around his waist snaps tight. A sudden jerk, he swings wildly through empty air. The momentum threatens to crush him right against the stone wall. To stop the impact, Chung Myung channels pure energy straight into his hands. He fires off his suction technique the exact second he hits the rock. His bones crack under the pressure, sending a massive wave of pain through him. Even with broken bones, he somehow manages to hold onto the wall. He curses his weak body, realizing these bones are as fragile as twigs. Then, looking over to the side, he spots his target. The secret cave is right there, but the rope is just too short to reach. He needs to build up some momentum, which means letting go of the wall. He releases his grip and lets the rope swing him back and forth. The rope groans under the stress as he starts building up speed. Swinging side to side, Chung Myung pushes hard to get enough distance. He needs to launch himself at the right moment, but just as he prepares to make his leap, the heavily strained rope snaps under the intense weight. His eyes widen in shock. His only lifeline is gone. He falls like a heavy stone, dropping down completely out of control. In desperation, he activates his suction technique again to try and grab on. The pressure nearly shatters his fingers, making him lose his grip. He slips and is thrown hard across the gap, slamming into a ledge. He hits the small stone platform, but keeps sliding toward the edge. He is heading straight for the void when a miracle suddenly happens. The broken end of the rope catches on a sharp rock, stopping his fall. Now he is just hanging there, right next to his old secret hideout. Every bone aches, the slide down was pure agony. Still, using the very last bit of his strength, he climbs. Crawling into the cave entrance, he gasps for air and starts to complain. He curses his past self, the great plum blossom sword saint, as a lunatic. Only a crazy person would build a secret hideout in a place like this. He assumes the guy went completely insane from all that intense training. But deep down, Chung Myung knows damn well he is describing himself. Somehow he survived. Against all odds, the kid is still breathing. With his fingertips, he slowly peels back a dusty, ancient cloth. Dust erupts instantly. It shows just how long this place sat abandoned. Yet what lies hidden beneath the fabric is surprisingly cozy. Past Chung Myung was clever enough to leave a glowing crystal here. He looks at the light, silently praising the absolute genius responsible. Then he remembers, he is literally just complimenting his own past self. He searches the hideout carefully, hoping to find his old stash. Most things are totally ruined now, just rotten food and decayed blankets. Then his eyes lock onto something important, a wooden chest. He knows this is exactly where his precious plum blossom pills are. The exact medicine from his past life that is essential to restore his strength. Slowly he lifts the lid. A sudden change fills the air. Crimson light bursts out, washing over his face in a warm glow. Suddenly, a rich, sweet fragrance of plum blossoms floods the entire cave. These are actually the priceless snow flower pills, incredibly rare treasures. They are far more valuable than standard plum blossom pills. He even mutters a quick apology to his former leader. But hey, at least he did not hide the sacred life pills here too. He grabs one of the pills. His body needs a massive boost immediately. He wants to rebuild his shattered internal strength as quickly as possible. Without a moment of hesitation, the kid pops it into his mouth. Down it goes. Would you hesitate when ultimate power is right there? He feels the difference instantly, even before the pill is fully digested. A searing heat courses through him, and a small red flame ignites. The heat travels quickly, filling the cold voids left in his body. The pill melts completely away before he can even chew it. Its rich, powerful essence suddenly explodes straight through his system. No time to celebrate, he immediately shuts his eyes to focus. He must focus all his attention on controlling this massive wave of energy. Letting even a single drop of this precious chi go to waste is not an option. Clenching his fists tight, he begins to circulate the raw power. Crimson aura fills the cave, but he instantly spots a critical problem. It is impossible to restore his true innate chi in this raw state. Even as Mount Hua Sec's ultimate treasure, these pills contain too many impurities. He cannot absorb something so heavily flawed directly into his danshin. He has to purify every single drop, even if he discards most of the energy. He knows this is easily the hardest, slowest, and most painful path. Yet it is the only way to build a truly perfect foundation. He refuses to let impatience ruin his grand comeback. So he begins filtering the energy, ruthlessly throwing away all impurities. After a grueling process, only a tiny sliver of pure chi remains. An absurd waste, sure, but it is exactly what he wanted. And guides them straight into the deepest depths of his danshin. The stray energy slowly begins to condense and merge together, forming a single glowing sphere. Resembling a tiny yet absurdly powerful star, the very instant it is complete. Colossal wave of energy explodes through the cave as a bright blue aura begins to spread in every direction. The pressure is monstrous, dense, and incredibly heavy. While the tiny ball that remains falls onto the cold cave floor, it is as if the very air itself is trembling. Raw power overflows from the young boy's body. Uncontrollably and suddenly he begins to float. It is like someone entering a state of true enlightenment. His neck tenses violently, causing his veins to bulge. When Chung Myung finally opens his eyes, his pupils have vanished, replaced by an incredibly intense blue light. Raw energy escapes from his eyes and mouth as if his physical shell can no longer contain such immense power. The sheer concentration of this force is almost too much to handle, making his hands tremble. With overwhelming power, yet Chung Myung's sheer willpower is absolute, and he finally manages to clench his fist. The cave falls into a deep, heavy silence, lit only by the glowing power radiating from his body. With his eyes still closed and his focus sharp, he slowly opens them to reveal a startling transformation. His gaze has completely shifted, and an intense blue light pours from His irises, something deep within, has completely changed, the painful fractures riddling. The body begins to heal as scars fade away and his bones strengthen, becoming far more resilient than before. His body's reaction to the pills is extraordinary, far exceeding all expectations. Impurities are expelled directly through his pores with every single breath, as each part of him purges old waste. Simultaneously, his meridians expand. Like rushing rivers that have finally been given space to flow freely. Suddenly, his heart begins to race, followed by a sharp pain exploding in his head. Like a sudden electric shock, the energy flowing from his lower dantian surges violently toward his middle dantian like a massive tidal wave crashing into everything in its path. Chung Myung knows that if this force reaches his upper dantian unchecked, the entire situation will become completely unstable and irreversible. Desperate, he tries to contain the wild flow, contracting his muscles and pressing down on his stomach with all his might to block the energy rising. Right then, a voice echoes in his mind. It is his master asking whether Chung Myung is a martial artist or a true Taoist. The voice explains that a martial artist tries to dominate by force and control, but a follower of the Tao simply allows things to flow naturally. His master warned him not to think he can ever dominate the world's flow. If you try to dam river, the water will only overflow and find another way. The secret is letting things go, because then everything flows exactly as it should. Since humans are also a part of nature, we should not try to control, but simply let be. Those words echo, penetrating deep into his troubled mind. The tension in Chung Myung's arms begins to fade and his fingers slowly loosen. Suddenly, everything goes black for a split second. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself in another realm, standing on a surface like water in a silent, empty space. Looking around in confusion, he spots a closed-off area far above. Fine glowing lines of blue energy crisscross the darkness. He realizes exactly where he is. He is standing inside his own upper dantian. Somehow, his instinct guided him right here. A heavily cracked, crumbling wall stands before him, showing just how broken his inner body is. Chung Myung steps closer. Placing his hand against the wall, he closes his eyes, trying to feel what lies beyond. Instantly, an absolute tidal wave of force hits him. An absurd pressure of rampaging Kai is screaming to break through. It is terrifyingly strong. There is no ignoring this power. The clock is ticking, and the danger is incredibly real. If he tries to block it, everything collapses, but letting it out all at once will completely shatter his upper dantian. He is stuck in a deadly trap. Taking a deep breath, Chung Myung knows there is no easy way out. Suddenly, his master's old teachings about trying to dam a roaring river echo in his mind. He finally gets it. Trying to hold this energy back will only destroy him. So instead of resisting, he slowly opens his palm, allowing a warm red energy to bleed out. Instantly, the massive blue fissure right in front of him expands, ready to unleash everything. The floodgates burst open, and both forces slam together in a massive clash. He remembers how he used to ignore his master, treating every lesson as simple nagging. Now everything is different, a blinding light floods his mind, but the wild energies do not crash. Instead, they wrap together, perfect balance. In this exact second, he finally gets it, the wild, chaotic Kai flowing deep inside Chung Myung completely shifts, true harmony. He feels it for the first time. Outside his quiet cave, the morning sun slowly rises. Hours must have slipped away without him even noticing. Suddenly, his eyes snap open to find himself floating, suspended right in midair. But as his mind wakes up, gravity fails, crash. He drops straight down onto his hard mat. Rubbing his back, he grumbles in absolute confusion about why he was even flying. Then he raises his hand. The fingers that were once completely shattered and bloody are now perfectly healed. Memories of the clash flash through his mind. He can feel his meridians are fully open, his raw strength transformed completely. It is unreal. His young body actually survived such an insane ordeal. One tiny slip would have been fatal. Deep down, he knows his master's teachings are the only reason he survived, and every single second of pain was worth it. He did not just recover his natural Kai, he purified it, widened his channels, and completely elevated his entire foundation. Simply put, his body is on a completely different level. Maybe this is the benefit of reincarnation, or perhaps he is finally starting to grasp the Tao. His master's old voice echoes once more, describing how regular warriors try to force control, while a true Taoist simply flows. In his previous life, Chung Myung was nothing but a deadly swordsman. But now he gets it, the Mount Hua sect is not just about the sword. It is rooted in the Tao, that is its true soul, and he finally understands it completely. Chung Myung stares out at the morning sky, lost in thought. He wonders if a broken soul like him can actually rebuild his home, but he is going to try. He looks back down at the chest of spiritual pills, realizing they are completely useless to him now, but then a brilliant plan hits him. He chose to leave those treasures behind. Chung Myung was ready to step out when he froze. Remembering something important, he quickly darted right back into the secret hideout. He slipped back out just as fast, carrying a pretty special extra load, several small bottles were tied snugly around his waist, not that he was some kind of desperate drunkard. He was just extremely curious to taste 100-year-old liquor. Leaving the cave, he looked around and deeply realized how much the entire sect had changed, yet this hidden cavern remained exactly as it had always been. Somehow, this simple sight brought him comfort, making him feel like he was reliving his past. A sudden wave of deep nostalgia washed over him, and a sharp pang of longing tightened his chest. He realized he should really try to visit this place much more often, without a second thought. He bent his knees and launched himself with incredible force. His body shot straight into the air, reaching an incredible height before landing lightly and quite effortlessly on another part of the rocky slope. Now he ascended the mountain, using only his feet, never even needing his hands for support. His movements were incredibly fluid and natural, his body responding perfectly through a series of high jumps, spins, and sudden bursts of speed. With one last push, he planted his feet firmly on the ground, leaping so high he soared, high enough to nearly touch the clouds. From that amazing vantage point, he watched the slowly rising sun paint a magnificent view on the horizon. Then he descended, landing safely from that absurd height without taking any damage. He dusted off his clothes and noticed how incredibly light his body felt, entirely free from any heavy weight, a pure sensation he had always longed for. Chung Myung took a deep breath, planning to savor the fresh mountain air, but his face immediately scrunched right up in complete disgust. A truly horrible smell invaded his nostrils, and it took him a moment to realize the foul stench was coming directly from his own body. It was definitely time for a bath. Meanwhile, discontent was brewing in the sect temple. One disciple complained about how freezing cold it was, while another groaned that his body was so exhausted that the heavy fatigue just wouldn't leave. A third grumbled about being too sleepy to rest properly. Amidst all these complaints, two boys quietly whispered about Chung Myung, commenting on just how incredibly strange he had seemed lately, with his face looking a complete mess and totally out of shape. He didn't even seem like the same person and had completely stopped showing up to their intense training sessions. One of the boys asked his companion if the rumors about Chung Myung suffering some internal overload were actually true, seeing as his physical condition was getting worse by the day. They figured that if he got to skip training for health reasons, then the rest of them shouldn't have to train either. The atmosphere was growing thick with suspicion, and several other disciples swallowed hard at the thought. Before this, they all obeyed Chung Myung because they knew it was completely impossible to oppose him, but now that fear seemed like a joke. Honestly, they have no idea what's coming. Perhaps if they all banded together, they could finally overthrow the tyrant forcing them to train day and night. Overhearing this, Yoonjong walked up to Go-jul and told him to just let them talk, saying that despite being naive, they would eventually learn the hard truth themselves. Right then, the heavy door behind them began to. The door slides open, light spills outside, drawing the gaze of everyone present. Tension builds with every passing second as a figure slowly steps forward. Total shock, this mysterious young man radiates absolute, glowing health. His silky hair and immense vitality leave the martial artists completely stunned. Their jaws drop. Standing right there is a fully recovered Chung Myung. Looking at him, one collective realization hits: they are in deep trouble. Fighting this completely renewed monster right now would mean certain death. Chung Myung addresses the crowd. He claims he feels absolutely terrible. With a heavy sigh, he explains his poor health forced him to neglect their training. He claims to feel a massive weight of responsibility for his actions. Sensing a trap, the terrified students desperately try to comfort him. But the young man simply places a gentle hand over his heart. He tells them he knows exactly how hard they worked while he was gone. Do not worry, even if mistakes happen, they can always be corrected. If what they lacked was training, then they will just train twice as hard. Pointing a thumb over his shoulder, Chung Myung signals toward the massive peak. It is an incredibly steep mountain, and he gives them one single instruction. Run. The entire group stands completely frozen, unsure of what to do. He clarifies the rules. The fastest ones to the top get rewarded. As for the slower half of the pack, they have to run it again. Wait, Lotus Mountain. They stare at him in absolute, silent disbelief. Before anyone can complain, one figure suddenly bolts forward. It is Yoonjong. Joe Gull is right on his heels, ready to accept this brutal challenge. They clear the wall. Other motivated disciples quickly scramble right behind them. Everyone remembers the catch. If you finish too far behind, you run again. Nobody wants that nightmare, so they sprint toward the mountain with everything they have. As the dust settles from the stampede, Chung Myung watches with a smirk. He chuckles to himself. Their little conspiracy against him was actually pretty cute. Honestly, he respects the sheer courage it took for them to try it. But courage without the actual power to back up their plans is completely worthless. If they want the right to speak up, they need real skill first. Fortunately, he is more than happy to help them beat it into shape. In 1,000 years of martial arts history, solo legendary masters were common. Countless individuals have risen to become the absolute strongest on their own. But one single powerhouse can never make an entire sect truly great. For true greatness, every single member of the group must be strong. He wants to rebuild that foundation to make their faction legendary. His beloved Mount Hua sect will rise far beyond its former glory. They will prosper again. Suddenly, he shouts out to boost their motivation. Anyone who finishes dead last will not get breakfast today. The morning sun rises, but the Mount Hua disciples are already broken. Total exhaustion. The entire martial arts squad is a complete mess right now. Even the highly energetic Joe Gull is collapsed on the ground, gasping. Yoonjong is the only one who manages to stay standing. He can barely hold himself up, leaving his struggling peer in absolute awe. Standing after that brutal session was impossible, showing why everyone respected the great Sa Yang. It was not just about his incredible skills, but his sheer mental fortitude under pressure. He constantly pushed past his limits. Meanwhile, Chung Myung sauntered over. He was carrying an absolutely massive rock, casually asking why it felt so light. Then he ordered everyone who finished training to hand over their heavy sandbags. He then acted completely shocked to find them all collapsed on the dirty ground. Barely started, how could they possibly be tired already? Grumbling, the kid muttered that youngsters these days had absolutely zero tenacity. He claimed things were different back in his day, despite being the youngest one there. Dropping 2 massive boulders, Chung Myung finally declared the training session over. He told them to rest up, warning that running away would only make things worse. 10 times worse, that was his promise if anyone dared slack off. They still had to clean the training gear, making the exhausted boys absolutely furious. Later at dinner, Yoonjong asked why his colleagues were not eating. One boy groaned in misery, saying he felt like he was going to throw up. Another stared up at his senior with the most pathetic, tearful expression on his face. Soon everyone was throwing him desperate puppy dog eyes, practically begging for his help. They asked if their senior genuinely thought this insane training was normal. Even Sa Yang was shaking. He could not even hold his chopsticks. Everyone at the table began begging Yoonjong to save them from this living nightmare. Looking for backup, the boy turned to ask Joe Gull for his honest opinion. Joe Gull paused his chopsticks, thinking carefully before finally speaking up. He admitted the training was getting way too intense, actively breaking their bodies. Joe Gull noted that while hammering iron makes it stronger, humans are completely different. We just cannot take that kind of constant beating, yet for some strange reason. Chung Myung did not seem to understand that basic concept at all. For now, he believed they should just push through and endure the pain. If things did not change soon, they would have a serious talk with him. The exhausted disciples agreed, and Yoonjong promised he would speak up first. Night fell as Joe Gull collapsed onto his bed, completely worn out. He took a ragged breath, desperately trying to relax his aching muscles. But the dread of waking up to more torture made his entire body ache in advance. He used to think he could overcome any challenge thrown his way, no matter what. But right now, he was seriously questioning if he would even survive this training. Just then, a faint voice whispered his name, pulling him back to reality. He opened his eyes to see Chung Myung, who quickly gestured for him to keep quiet. Holding a small object, Chung Myung explained that this was incredibly rare. He went through hell to get it, but he wanted Joe Gull to have it. He held out his hand, revealing a hidden treasure to his stunned friend. Honestly, can you blame him? Joe Gull's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. Barely keeping his voice down, he asked if that was a legendary pill of life. Chung Myung shushed him instantly, leaving Joe Gull wondering why he got this blessing. The kid explained that he knew exactly how much Joe Gull needed the boost. However, he had to keep this an absolute secret from all the other disciples. He told his friend to swallow the pill immediately before anyone else noticed. He really wanted to help. The young disciple felt deeply ashamed of his thoughts. Placing a hand on his back, a dark idea sparks in his mind. He sports a wicked grin, knowing exactly how to manipulate a desperate man. Wait until you see what he has planned. This senior's nightmare is just beginning. Their training is about to get brutal. Soon, night falls, echoing with malicious laughter. Morning arrives quickly. The disciples gather once more, gripping their heavy wooden swords. Everyone is completely locked in, desperate to refine their basic forms. Great Sasuk Ungam watches them, instantly sensing a major shift. The disciples swing, and their sword paths look incredibly steady. Even though they are practicing the exact same drills, things feel different. Their strikes are sharper. The instructor feels an undeniable weight. He senses the solid, grounding strength embedded in their stances. This steady base lets them pour real, heavy power into every strike. Ungam wonders if such rapid progress is even possible in this time frame. He remembers when Chung Myung confidently asked for just 1 month. The kid swore he would deliver undeniable results before the deadline. Perhaps it is the morning run, but then something else catches his eye. He looks at their faces. Their eyes are sharp, burning with focus. It is a fierce fire he has not seen in these kids for years. Clearing his throat, the instructor calls a break to address the class. Their swordplay looks incredibly lively and precise, catching everyone off guard. He is genuinely thrilled to see everyone training with such fierce determination. If they keep this up, he announces a massive change to their lessons. He will skip the basic phases entirely. Instead, he will teach them the advanced Tei, bewildering sword technique next. Nobody expected third-class disciples to learn this. This is ultimate proof of how incredibly far they have all come. And seeing their hard work pay off only drives them to push harder. These kids are heading for greatness when suddenly a frantic voice calls out. It is the sect leader, Hyun Jong, looking incredibly rushed and anxious. They step aside for privacy, and Ungam asks what brings him here so suddenly. What could possibly bring the leader to the White Plum Blossom boarding house? With a grim face, Hyun Jong whispers that they have a serious problem. He presents the ancient equilibrium sword manual found in Chung Myung's chest. The leader tells him to read the final page, and Ungam flips it open. Scanning the last passage, the instructor's eyes go wide with absolute shock. He looks back at Hyun Jong, completely unable to process what he sees. The text is a personal letter addressed directly to the future sect leader. Every single word was crafted just for him. The ancestor explains that refining their martial arts is actually perfectly fine. Their techniques are meant to evolve and improve over many generations. But then the ancient text delivers a heavy, undeniable warning. The Plum Blossom sword technique is the sacred pillar supporting the sect. To alter this foundation would completely destroy the true spirit of Mount Hua. Because of this, the author begs his successor to protect it forever. Anyone reading these words would feel the crushing weight. Ungam clutches the pages, his face darkening with every line. The message is simple. The Plum Blossom style is their core foundation. Everything built afterward relies completely on mastering this single starting step. Without this basic style, they are simply building on sand. Realizing this, Ungam slowly looks up to face the sect leader. Times have changed, he argues, yet they still cling to the past. Why else would their own predecessors create a faster, updated combat technique? The original method simply takes far too many years for anyone to master. Hyun Jong remains perfectly calm, listening to his brother's heavy concern. That is exactly why he came here, looking for an honest opinion. The sect abandoned their ancient foundation for the sake of quick power. But the words of their founders cannot just be swept aside. Those ancient teachings are meant to guide every single successor. Every sect must carry the heavy responsibility of its legacy. How can they turn their backs on the direct wishes of ancestors? The leader turns to Ungum, searching for a real, honest answer. You train the youngest kids, so your voice matters most. The great Sasok looks down, slowly turning the pages. His mind races as he weighs tradition against their current survival. A tense silence hangs in the room before he speaks. Ungum finally raises his head, his voice turning incredibly steady. The newer style was created purely out of desperate necessity. They had absolutely no time for slow training when ruin was staring them down. Mount Hua could have vanished from the world at any second. He asks a brutal question: does the sect actually have a future today? The sudden question catches Hyan Jong completely off guard. He hesitates, knowing their temporary safety is barely a band-aid. Taking a deep breath, the leader confesses he has no simple answer. He just wants Ungum to understand his impossible position. Suddenly, the great Sasok slams the manual shut with a loud crack. He makes his stance perfectly clear: he is completely against this change. Hyan-jong is shocked, but Ungum quickly delivers the hard truth. Forcing this transition on the young disciples will not be easy. Even sharing the same roots, the two techniques are totally different. One requires endless, slow grinding, while the other brings rapid results. The talented young disciples are already used to the faster style. Teaching them the old way now could ruin their entire foundation. Besides, the original style demands a rock-solid lower body and a serious attitude that these children simply lack. He believes it is already far too late for them to develop those traits. The sect leader asks him to repeat those core requirements. As Ungum speaks those exact words aloud, a sudden realization strikes him. He spins around to check on the training boys, and his jaw drops. Their lower bodies are already incredibly stable, solid as mountain stone. They were all taking their training much more seriously than ever before. Sect leader Hyan-jong noticed their incredibly rapid progress. Quite confused, Ungum admitted he had done nothing different lately. But wait, look at who his eyes lock onto next. It was Chung Myung, casually picking his nose without a care. Deep down, the great Sasok knew this boy deserved the credit. Realizing this, the master excused himself to speak with the kid. He walked straight over and shouted Chung Myung's name quite firmly. The sudden shout startled the kid, and Ungum asked him a blunt question. He asked whether it was better to go slow and aim high, or go fast with certainty. He wanted to know which of those two paths was more fitting for Mount Hua. Aim high, the boy answered instantly without even blinking his eyes. Curious, Ungum asked him why Chung Myung kept it pure. He simply said it was because they were Mount Hua. The answer completely shocked the leader with its pure, sudden wisdom. An ancient ideal from their glorious past had just come from their youngest. The boy calmly explained his reasoning to the two older masters. He said that for any other sect in the land, safety made complete sense. But not for them; they could never compromise with reality. Since they wanted to reclaim their lost glory, they had to aim high. The leader stood frozen, realizing this child saw the deep truth. He had parsed Ungum's test and answered correctly. Hyan-jong leaned forward, asking if they must never make concessions. The kid agreed, leaving the two old masters staring in shock. They quickly dismissed him, watching him walk back to practice. A heavy silence fell. The leader admitted he felt quite ashamed. He never expected to hear such a profound lesson from a child. It was a wonderfully simple concept, yet at the same time extremely complex. Ungum agreed, noting that kids speak freely because they lack fear. They are simply not yet affected by the harsh limits of reality. Hearing this, the great Sasok made a firm personal choice. He refused to bring any shame upon that inspiring young boy. The massive decision before them felt heavier than ever. Choosing their foundational art would define their entire future. This single choice would shape the destiny of the Mount Hua sect. After a tense silence, Hyan-jong turned to Ungum. He officially issued a major command as the supreme leader of their sect. Starting today, they would abandon their current sword style. They were reverting back to the legendary, ancient plum blossom sword technique. Furthermore, they would rethink every single martial art they practiced. The leader stressed that Ungum would play a vital role in this. As head of the boarding house, his support was absolutely essential. They absolutely refused to be a powerless, forgotten sect in this world. As long as they carried their name, they must aim high. And above all else, they must think of the younger generation. Those kids were the future of the sect, even if they couldn't reach their goals now. Once these youngsters took charge, things would change. Mount Hua would finally reclaim its former legendary glory. Back at the training grounds, Chung Myung scoffed. Why was a sect leader asking a mere kid for business advice? It felt like he had to feed these people and then teach them how to chew. Utterly pathetic. He sighed. These guys literally could not get anything right, probably ruining everything he had built so far. With things this messy, he decided a direct visit to the Huam district was urgently needed. The fools were likely ruining every single shop over there too. He ended up grumbling out loud that the entire sect was doomed without him. After endless struggle, Mount Hua was finally supposed to enjoy some peace. The crushing debt was gone, and their lost arts were finally restored. A bright new future lay ahead, a path meant for pure joy. The temple halls should have been full of laughter. Instead, reality hit like a slap to the face. The scene was absolute chaos. Clutching his head, Chung Myung pulled his senior, Joe Gull, aside for answers. He went straight to the point, asking if Joe Gull really came from wealth. Is it true your family runs a massive merchant empire? He needed to know if they owned major trade routes across the land. But Joe Gull merely rolled his eyes, downplaying his family's modest business. We are just a small, ordinary merchant house. Smiling slyly, Chung Myung nudged him to stop playing dumb. Surely he had some secret, hidden genius for making money. Joe Gull just stared blankly, so his junior let it drop. Forget it, he muttered, turning to watch the unfolding disaster together. The tea shop was a complete, agonizing train wreck. Angry patrons shouted about bitter tea and completely messed up orders. Arms crossed, Joe Gull admitted the old bosses were complete crooks. They were corrupt, sure, but they actually knew how to run things. They kept a tight ship and built real loyalty with the staff. The workers were mostly local families, bound by deep, long-standing trust. But once they left, everything crumbled. Chung Myung asked if the staff was the issue. Joe Gull shook his head, explaining that was only a tiny part of it. But the core problem actually ran much deeper than a few missing staff. The simple truth was that Mount Hua's elders possessed absolutely zero business sense. It was like throwing pearls to swine. They had a goldmine but no clue. They held a massive fortune in their hands, yet wasted it completely. Right next to them, the disciples panicked over a mountain of orders. One stammered an excuse, shouting that he had never handled luxury items before. Watching the sheer panic, Joe Gull let out a heavy sigh. Trade isn't just about selling, he pointed out, it's a delicate balance. You have to source the right ingredients, or else you run out of money. If they only buy luxury stock, they'll never turn a single copper coin. But if they stock cheap garbage, customers will never come back. Plus, hiring outsiders to manage things means those managers could easily end up pocketing all the profits, leaving the sect with absolutely nothing. Chung Myung asks if they should just start learning how to run a business themselves. Joe Gull stares at him and fires back, asking if he would teach martial arts to 40-year-old men starting from absolute scratch. He argues that even if they try to learn, suppliers will spot their total lack of experience and completely cheat them, taking advantage and draining all the sect's money. Discouraged, Joe Gull drops his head, utterly convinced they are doomed from the start. In silence, Chung Myung watches him until a sudden memory of his old master surfaces, making him realize how truly incredible that man was. Annoyed, he remembers how prosperous their businesses were when his master was alive. He even thinks staying dead would have been better than dealing with this. Exhausted, Chung Myung asks Joe Gull for a solution, but his friend snaps back, repeating that he has absolutely no idea. He claims that if he had the skills to solve a massive mess like this, he would already be a legendary merchant. Heck, even his own father couldn't handle this. Concerned, Chung Myung asks if it is really that serious. His senior nods, explaining that running a business of this scale requires deep roots, tradition, and a massive reputation, all things they completely lack. Sighing, Joe Gull mutters that if Elder Hwang were still active, things would be totally different. That name instantly catches Chung Myung's attention. He has never heard of this person. Joe Gull explains that Hwang is a legendary merchant, famous throughout the region, and easily one of the most prominent figures in the whole province. He traded from the East Sea all the way to the Western lands. Plus, He was actually a major patron of the Mount Hua sect for decades. Surprised, Chung Myung asks sarcastically what a wealthy man saw in a broke sect with 0 decent disciples. Joe Gull gets understandably annoyed by the insult, but they let the argument go. Continuing, Joe Gull mentions that the elder sponsored many different places back then, and having him around to offer some business advice would solve all their problems. Excited by the idea, Chung Myung stands up, declaring the problem solved. They just need to ask Hwang for help, but of course, there is always a catch. Joe Gull instantly crushes his hype, explaining that it is completely impossible. He has been bedridden for a year, and rumors say he is unconscious. Hearing this, Chung Myung slumps back down, losing his last shred of hope. Suddenly, a voice breaks the silence. Calling out his name, it is the great Sasok holding a sealed envelope. The 2 disciples bow respectfully to their master, who looks incredibly serious. He announces that he has something very important to discuss with them. He needs Chung Myung to return to Mount Hua. The boy hates the idea. Whining about how exhausting the long trip will be, he tries to negotiate, saying his body is the youngest and therefore the weakest, but Gum retorts that he is also the only one doing absolutely nothing. Chung Myung chuckles and argues that he swept the garden earlier, realizing there is no escape. He finally asks the reason for this sudden trip, handing over the envelope. The great Sasok explains he needs him to deliver it directly to the sect leader. It seemed highly urgent, sent by the Yunha Merchant Guild, meaning he had to handle the entire delivery with absolute care. Upon name, Joe Gull leaned over and whispered that this was actually Elder Hwang's very own. Worked with, hearing this connection, Chung Myung suddenly became extremely interested in the whole task. He accepted the letter. His master then ordered immediate departure. With a serious face, the boy promised to deliver it. Promised he would deliver the envelope as fast as his feet could carry him. The boy then set off, beginning the long walk back to his sect. Anxious about his valuable cargo, he watched the empty road closely. Path ahead, carefully, he slipped the secret letter out from deep within his robes. To take a quick peek, it was from Elder Hwang's guild, and since rumors said the elder lay unconscious, he definitely did not write it. His curiosity to read the private contents was massive, but a heavy wax seal blocked the way. Even so, a pretty dark thought crossed the boy's mind. It was only natural to want to read such an incredibly important and secret letter, and maybe his master would even agree, but then he pictured his master's scolding, angry face. Flipping it over, he saw it was addressed to the sect leader, a message sent from someone who was supposedly lying completely unconscious. Meant serious trouble. He convinced himself that in hard times, all martial artists should support each other. It just made sense. Besides, he would surely get a massive favor in return. Who could blame him? Waiting, Chung Myung tore the envelope open. He skipped the polite introductions and read the real message. Elder Hwang's son wrote it, explaining that his father's condition was growing worse. Old age brought severe sickness, and his energy veins were bursting out of control. His skin turned bright red before he collapsed, losing consciousness entirely. Now a strange black mark had surfaced right on his forehead. Seeing that detail, Chung Myung instantly recognized a terrible omen from his past, which was the work of an ancient enemy, the Yunha Merchant Guild had already brought in legendary physicians, but they couldn't diagnose this highly unusual and deeply baffling sickness. Desperate, his son sent letters to all his father's old connections, begging for any useful information. He promised a massive reward from the guild to anyone who knew how to treat it. With that, Jong-il Hwang, the young guild leader, waited very anxiously. Reading these words, a flood of dark memories filled his mind. He knew normal doctors could never hope to cure this disease, which was actually called the demon flower. On the surface, it looked like normal poisoning, which explains why those doctors failed. But the real reason Chung Myung was so deeply shaken lay much deeper. This technique belonged to his ultimate nemesis, the dreaded Cheonma. It only happens when a victim is struck by the dark magic of the celestial demon sect. He gritted his teeth, cursing those monsters. He had truly believed they were wiped out at the Kilian Mountains, but apparently some survived. That twisted lineage had actually survived, but if those fiends were still breathing, they had to be plotting something inside Zhang Yuan. Still, another worry weighed on him. What if these demons still held a massive grudge against the Mount Hua sect, causing chaos even after all this time? To make things worse, they Targeted Elder Huang, the exact person who could help their current situation. Chung Myung stared at the letter, completely lost in his own thoughts. The description alone did not guarantee it was the demon flower, so his best move was to go and confirm it with his own eyes. Besides, that promise of a tremendous reward kept fueling his desire to go. According to Joe Gull, the Una Merchant Guild sat on an absolute fortune, meaning any prize from them would be massive. On top of that, barely anyone left alive would even recognize the flower, which meant there was going to be absolutely zero competition. Anyone with real knowledge had been wiped out in the great battle, folding up. The note, the young master realized he was still blind to recent history. What if someone else out there could actually diagnose this strange disease? If this letter fell into the wrong hands, things would get incredibly messy. He had to beat everyone to the punch, picking up his speed. He resolved to settle this immediately and secure his heavy bag of cash. He burst into a full sprint with an excited shout, warning the world that absolutely nobody better dare steal a single coin from the great Chung Myung. After a grueling journey, night blanketed the mountain, casting a canopy of stars. Exhausted disciples dragged their feet up the steps, whining about the brutal daily grind. Yunjong quietly led the pack until a sudden, frantic voice called his name. It was Joe Gull, sprinting toward him in a state of absolute, chaotic panic. Yunjong sighed, thinking his martial brother was just acting childish again. But something about his sheer desperation forced Yunjong to listen. Gasping for air, Joe Gull collapsed forward and yelled out in a panic that there was a massive emergency involving Chung Myung. Hearing that name, Yunjong went completely cold, instantly bolting forward. The pair ran at absolute breakneck speed, reaching the young master's room and kicked the door open, only to find the entire space completely empty. Yunjong scowled, wondering where that maniac had gone, as Joe Gull pointed to a tiny note resting quietly right there on the bed. Yunjong snatched it up and read. The kid was taking a short trip and demanded they fabricate an excuse for him while keeping up their intense training. A fat vein instantly began to throb right on Yunjong's forehead. His patience had officially snapped. Joe Gull, looking entirely lost, asked what their next move should be. Yunjong exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm, and whispered that they must keep his disappearance a total secret for now. Crumpling the note into a tight ball, he grumbled that telling the others would only cause useless panic, since the kid said he would return soon. They just had to cover for him and stall for as long as possible. As long as no search party was called, the elders probably wouldn't notice. Since he was only a low-ranking third-class disciple, Joe Gull swallowed hard. What would happen if they got caught? Yunjong turned slowly toward his buddy, asking if that was actually his main concern right now, because in reality things were so much worse. The senior wanted to know what absolute mess that lunatic had gotten into this time, and what kind of chaos he was going to unleash. Meanwhile, far across the region, a massive thick forest stretched out to the horizon. Suddenly, a sharp noise ripped through the quiet air. A blur shot across the sky, vaulting from branch to branch with incredible grace. It was our main guy. His movements were insanely fast and precise, practically weightless as he pushed forward without pausing. He knew he could not waste any time, and stuck to the high branches to steer clear of trouble below. With effortless movements, he cleared the woods easily, taking some massive leaps to build speed and map out his trajectory. The moment he hit the branch, he kept driving forward, but even the best stamina has its limits, and fatigue finally started creeping in. The kid slowed down to catch his breath. He had traveled nearly 150 kilometers already. His throat felt parched and his limbs were growing heavy. Looking up at the sky, he recalled his glory days when one leap cleared a whole mountain peak, and a couple of steps took him across massive rivers. Back then, walking slowly was faster than running. Now, all he wanted was a cold drink. Chung Myung wiped off the sweat, his mind drifting as he finally recognized the area. Right below him, the bustling city of Xi'an sparkled in the sunlight. Viewed from the peak, this city held so many memories, and a specific one rushed back. He saw his past self holding a jug of alcohol. Back then, he was the famous Chung Myung, the incredible second-class disciple of the Mount Hua sect, strolling through town without a care. Nothing beat drinking away from the watchful eyes of his elders, laughing and living without a care. He was already getting a bit tipsy when his shoulder clipped against A random passerby, the bottle still half full, slipped and shattered on the cobblestones below, catching his attention. He turned to face the angry guy he had just bumped into. The man looked absolutely furious, glaring, and demanded an apology right now, but then his face twisted. Pure mockery, sneering that he could smell rotten plums in the air. He glared with absolute contempt, asking if he was just another pathetic fool. From the Mount Hua sect, the broken bottle lay between them on the street. Our hero just stared back, waiting to see what this guy would do next. When nothing happened, he coldly ordered him to pick up the bottle. In response, the man just smirked with pure arrogance. He scoffed that everyone from Mount Hua was exactly the same and totally classless, mocking how their so-called young masters were chased off like street dogs for being too arrogant. He kept insulting them, yelling that they still had the nerve to show up in Shanxi, spreading their pathetic, rotten plum stench everywhere. He glared with a menacing look, declaring the Southern Edge sect would teach them respect. That is what happens when someone causes trouble on their territory. Hearing this, Chung Myung's gaze shifted completely, overflowing with quiet hatred and absolute focus. He stepped forward, marching right over the rolling bottle as he closed the distance with those rival sect disciples. With a sudden reverse kick, up flew the bottle high into the air. His target's eyes tracked it, totally distracted by the spinning object. Right in that split second, the boy moved like a bolt of lightning straight through them. He slammed a heavy strike into the first guy, then bypassed the second so fast he only felt a gust of wind, while the third opponent could not even track his shadow. By the end of his dash, Chung Myung simply reached out, catching the falling bottle without looking. At that very moment, all three enemies took heavy blows straight to the chest, leaving them completely paralyzed, totally broken. And trust me, the blood feud between the Mount Hua sect and the Southern Edge sect is incredibly messy. Most people wondered why they hated each other so passionately. Honestly, though, perhaps the better question was not why they fought, but how they could ever stop. Both were proud Taoist sects, relying on the sword as their main weapon, sparking a relentless, centuries-long competition. Every single argument over who was superior always ended in a brutal duel. Because of this, the average disciples of Mount Hua tried their best to avoid the Southern Edge completely, even staying far away from Shanxi. But naturally, that rule never applied to our main character. To him, Shanxi was the ideal playground to escape his master's nagging eyes. It was a place to drink, gamble, and do whatever he wanted, even if that meant dragging himself into endless street brawls. And though he never went out looking for trouble, he always walked away as the sole winner. Honestly, it was the Southern Edge martial artists who could never stop hunting him down, showing a ridiculous level of dedication to challenging him even after getting thrashed half to death. It was like getting beaten was their favorite pastime. This weirdly toxic obsession was probably what helped build the legendary strength of the Southern Edge today, and that is exactly why this entire headache started. Our main character knows all too well that handling these persistent rivals is going to be a nightmare. Shaking off the thought, the young man gently patted the plum blossom emblem embroidered on his robe, taking a deep breath, reassuring himself that everything would be completely fine. After all, this situation was entirely different from his past life when they hunted him endlessly. Meanwhile, far away, Elder Huang, the head of the merchant guild, lay unmoving as healers observed him in silence. His arms were abnormally red, thick veins bulging beneath the skin. His condition was getting visibly worse. The people gathered nearby exchanged grim, worried looks, and the elder's son Zhang Yi bowed his head, feeling the heavy weight of the trial ahead. Zhang Yi quietly explained that not even the medical experts from the Sichuan Tang family, famous masters of medicine and poison, could find any cure. The other specialist present replied that while the Tang family's skill was indeed legendary, they missed a crucial detail: what his father was suffering from was not poison. Stunned, Zhang Yi Huang could barely believe it. How could it not be poison? Every single symptom pointed directly to it. But the mysterious doctor stayed calm, insisting that looks can be deceiving. The cause lay elsewhere. Driven by pure panic, Zhang Yi grabbed his sleeve. He held on tight, begging for any clue about this strange disease. His heart hammered with terror and hope, but reality quickly snapped him back. Realizing his disrespect, he let go and apologized for letting his emotions take over. The doctor only sighed, shaking his head with a look of quiet defeat. Nothing more could be done. He prepared to walk out the door, No cure, no answers, absolutely zero hope left for the family. Left alone, Zhangyi watched his father grow weaker with each passing day. It was a brutal reminder. All their gold could not buy a recovery. His father spent a lifetime helping others, yet here he lay suffering endlessly. Trembling with tears welling up, the young master refused to just give up. Suddenly, a voice shattered the heavy silence. Someone was asking to enter. The wooden door slowly creaked open as Zhangyi wiped his tears away. An imposing figure stepped over the threshold with slow, calm strides. This was Mok Sungkai, a prominent elder from the Southern Edge sect. He took in the grim sight before delivering a rather blunt reality check, telling the young master it was time to finally face reality. The only path to saving Elder Hwang was performing a sacred Taoist ritual. Zhangyi grimaced, understanding the hidden cost, but firmly shook his head. Not yet, he had no intention of submitting to them so easily. But the elder pushed back, claiming their help was a rare privilege. Still, Zhangyi insisted he wanted to wait for replies to his letters. This response visibly annoyed the prideful Southern Edge sect master. He snapped that waiting around was pointless, making Zhangyi deeply uncomfortable. Closing his eyes, Zhangyi found the older man incredibly disrespectful. Hands tied, Mok Sungkai held far too much power here. He belonged to the Southern Edge sect, one of the 10 legendary factions, which had recently become an unrivaled power that nobody dared to cross. No choice when a grand elder speaks, a merchant's son must listen. They would surely charge a fortune, but gold was no obstacle now. If it saved his father, he would gladly pay any price. Talk about sketchy, they clearly wanted something much worse than gold. Mok Sungkai kept lecturing him, scoffing at those useless letters. Suddenly, a panicked servant burst in, calling out for his master. The breathless worker scrambled forward, trembling with sheer disbelief. They were here. Someone from the Mount Hua sect had actually arrived. Wait for it, this was the exact group everyone had written off. The letter had barely arrived, yet a savior was already here. Hearing that name made Mok Sungkai's face twist with absolute rage. He sneered that the ruined faction was clearly plotting some scheme. How dare those bankrupt martial artists have the audacity to show their faces here? He gripped Zhangyi's shoulder, advising him not to waste his time. A fallen sect had nothing to offer a dying man anyway. Believed they could cure Elder Hwang, Zhangyi kept his composure, explaining that because he was the one who asked for help, he could not simply turn away. A guest who traveled all this way without at least greeting them, Mok Sung, went silent for a moment. His gaze hardened, but he eventually gave in and slowly pulled his hand off Zhangyi's shoulder. The young leader then headed down the hall with a servant, asking where this traveler was waiting. They could not keep a guest from so far waiting at the gate. To him, manners still mattered even in the absolute chaos of things. As they approached the massive main gate, the son gripped the handle and took a deep breath. This was his shot, the one chance to save his dying father, a moment. Later, he swung the gates open, bowed deeply, and apologized for the absolute disrespect. He introduced himself as Zhangyi Hwang, young master of the Yunhe Merchant Guild. He took full responsibility for his subordinates' failure and begged the visitor to forgive their rudeness. The guest replied casually he understood and had not come expecting any fancy hospitality. Zhangyi's eyes dropped down to the stranger's feet, and he caught something strange. The visitor was standing balanced on a single leg. As his gaze slowly traveled upward, his face went completely blank, standing. There was just a young boy, a disciple of the Mount Hua sect. A heavy, awkward silence fell over them, completely unexpected. Zhangyi broke the quiet first, asking where the rest of his group was. Chung Myung simply replied that he had come entirely by himself. Leaving the young master stunned, the kid then repeated his claim, stating he knew exactly how to cure Elder Hwang, demanding to see him right now and wait for it. The brat also casually added that he wanted to see that massive reward promised in the letter. His words echoed in the courtyard, leaving Zhangyi completely speechless and entirely unsure of what to do. The silence returned, even heavier now as Chung Myung stood his ground. A single burning question filled Zhangyi's mind. Who on earth was this kid? Stunned, Zhangyi repeated his question, needing to make absolutely sure the boy was really alone. Chung Myung just gave a calm smile, saying he was, but Zhangyi still could not process it, so he asked again. Patiently, Chung Myung kept that peaceful face of his and confirmed the facts. The elder son then shot a deeply confused look at his guard, who only shrugged, looking just as lost as his master. Another awkward silence rolled in while the young disciple stood waiting outside. Outside the gates, Zhangyi started to wonder if the Mount Hua sect was mocking the Yunhe Merchant Guild, or was there some kind of hidden strategy or dirty trap at play. Suddenly, a cold scoff cut through the air. Mok Sung stepped up with a smug grin, asking if this wasn't exactly what they should have expected. He sneered that dealing with Mount Hua was always a massive waste of time. They kept sticking their noses in places they did not belong, only to send some random boy in the end. Mok Sung added that their leader was supposedly a wise old man, but he could not be much if he resorted to such cheap, desperate moves. Chung Myung listened to the petty insults. He stood in absolute silence. He knew his young face made this reaction pretty much unavoidable. Time to show them what the young disciple was truly made of. He offered a deeply respectful bow, apologizing for the late greeting. He introduced himself as Chung Myung, a third-class Mount Hua disciple. He confirmed their letter had arrived, then calmly added a shocker. He recognized the symptoms. He knew exactly what was wrong. Those words hit Zhangyi like a physical blow. His eyes went wide. He could not even hide his sudden, intense excitement. He asked if the kid truly understood his father's condition. Chung Myung nodded. Zhangyi's heart hammered in his chest. He clenched his fist tightly. No one had spoken with such absolute certainty. So many famous doctors had visited, but they all failed. None could diagnose the disease without examining the patient first. This voice brought real hope to Zhangyi, but Mok Sung quickly intervened. With pure contempt, he sneered that it was absurd for a brat to lie like this. He warned Zhangyi to stop listening, calling the boy a fraud. They were wasting precious time and should just leave right now. But Chung Myung stopped them. He politely asked for a moment. With his hands clasped behind his back, he asked a sharp question. Who was he calling a brat? Heavy silence returned quickly. The proud leader of the Southern Edge sect pointed to himself. He asked if that question was for him. Chung Myung did not blink. He confirmed there was no other loudmouth in the room. Mok Sung's face twisted as he loudly demanded respect for elders. Now watch this. Chung Myung casually digs a finger into his ear. He asked if the man was really from the Southern Edge sect. He assumed he was a doctor. After all, he acted so incredibly all-knowing. If that was true, surely he could cure the elder. Feeling highly challenged, Mok Sung scowled and snapped back angrily. He claimed the elder had wandered from the path of the Tao. Only a Taoist ritual could save him. Chung Myung smirked slightly. If it is just a ritual, then they should call the Wudang or Kunlun sects. After all, those guys are the actual experts in this field. Neither Mount Hua nor the Southern Edge sect knows anything about it. Looking straight at Zhangyi, Chung Myung offered some free advice. It is always best to pick the option that actually works. Otherwise, you just get scammed. Surely the son agreed with that. This absolutely broke Mok Sung's temper. His face turned bright red. He screamed, demanding to know if this brat had ever learned any basic manners. He spun to Zhangyi, asking why they were still dealing with him. But Zhangyi just let out a slow, incredibly deep and silent breath. A quiet pause, then he declared this was the Yunhe Merchant Guild. This was not the Southern Edge sect. He would choose his guests. Zhangyi turned back to Chung Myung, preparing to ask some vital questions. But first he wanted to ask questions, so Chung Myung started explaining. He heard Elder Hwang traveled a lot and guessed that right before getting sick, he visited the Kilian Mountains, ending his guess with a smirk to ask if he was correct. Surprise flashed in Zhangyi's eyes, but he replied that the boy was wrong. Shocked, Chung Myung asked if Hwang was ambushed during his travels, but Zhangyi denied this as well, saying his father had not been cornered in the last 5 years. Confused, the young disciple tried to figure out where the elder could have been struck. Zhangyi's hope died instantly, gone, and Mok Sung burst into loud, mocking laughter. He gloated that he warned them it would be a total waste of time, calling Mount Hua a sect of cheap charlatans trying to deceive people, which was now more obvious than ever. Zhangyi turned to Chung Myung again and said that while he appreciated the boy's passion, he could not risk his father's health on an amateur who might make it worse. Turning away, he told the young man to go back to his sect and promised he would pass along his gratitude to their leader for the concern. However, Chung Myung refused to quit, Before the heavy gates slammed shut, he stopped one with his bare hand, asking if Elder Hwang's body was turning red and getting colder. That sudden question startled Zhang, and his face instantly changed. The boy kept going, describing how pressing his skin would make it turn pale white. Before the redness flushed back, right before passing out, he added, "The elder must have felt a freezing chill, like being trapped in an ice cave." Finally, he mentioned the dark spots scattered not just between his eyebrows but also on the back of his neck and skull. Hearing these details, Zhang snapped. He grabbed the gates, threw them wide open to demand how the boy knew all of this. With a confident grin, Chung Myung simply asked if he could continue. Bowing low, Zhang urged the young man to enter, promising to lead him to his father. This sudden turn of events left Mak Sung completely speechless. He protested, claiming those were only basic symptoms of someone suffering from a corrupted energy. Zhang immediately fired back, asking if corrupt energy caused dark spots to form on the neck and head. He then demanded to know why, if the Southern Edge sect leader knew so much, he could not cure his father. Mak Sung stammered, speechless. Zhang warned him not to interfere again, or he would have to cut ties with the Southern Edge sect. Watching with a slight smirk, Chung Myung saw Mak Sung storm off, fuming with absolute rage. Soon, Chung Myung entered the elder's room and pulled back the sheet covering Elder Hwang. He observed the man on the bed, whose condition was incredibly bad. The symptoms perfectly matched the deadly demonic flower, but he suspected this was an incomplete version. After all, if Hwang was hit by a high-level demonic technique, he never would have survived for a whole year. The young disciple took the elder's arm to examine it closely, and a glowing blue energy began to flow from his hands straight into Hwang's body. With this, Chung Myung confirmed his suspicion. Confirmed, the demonic flower was incomplete, prompting Zhangji to ask if Zhangyi fears the worst, but Chung Myung replies that treating Hwang really is not that hard. In his deep anxiety, Zhangyi completely mishears the young disciple and begins to panic. He starts crying out, how hopeless, but then the boy's actual words sink in. He gasps in sheer shock. This kid just claimed the treatment would be easy. Chung Myung just blinks his eyes, calmly repeating his promise. Basic first aid was already applied. The absolute worst is over. The old merchant is no longer on the brink of death, a massive relief. Look closer, the dark purple tint on the forehead is already fading. Still, a complete recovery will definitely take some time and preparation. Zhangyi, shaken by this sudden hope, urgently asks what is needed. Looking up, the young disciple declares the first item on his list, breakfast. Several empty bowls later, the greedy kid is happily stuffing his face. He happily devours a feast provided by the guild, while the young master remains anxious. Zhangyi asks about the preparations again. The hungry hero just takes a moment to swallow. Curing the elder takes an immense amount of energy, which is exactly why a proper, heavy meal is so crucial right now. This highly convenient excuse makes Zhangyi pretty suspicious, but the boy just eats. He praises the delicious food, knowing Zhangyi has to trust him anyway. Chung Myung then admits that curing the sick elder is not the main issue. The real challenge, uncovering why he fell ill in the first place. To figure that out, he needs to ask some very specific questions. First, who is the absolute closest person to the elder right now? Someone who stays by his side constantly, both traveling and at home. And critically, someone who is not Zhangyi. The young master is completely baffled. Chung Myung shrugs. Just for treatment purposes, he says. Zhangyi falls silent, thinking. He admits he is not quite sure, since so many loyal servants surround his father. He can easily name at least 5 close individuals who fit that description. Biting into a juicy piece of chicken, Chung Myung sighs at the sheer number. Finding the right suspect is going to be incredibly annoying. Zhangyi watches him and asks what exactly the young disciple is trying to find here. Chung Myung finishes chewing his food. Time for the heavy truth. Judging by his condition, this was definitely not an outside attack. In other words, a close associate is deliberately poisoning him from within. Furious, Zhangyi leaps to his feet and slams his hands onto the table. He angrily warns the boy to watch his mouth, defending his people. Everyone in the Merchant Guild is family, and they deeply respect his father. He puts down his chopsticks, noting that if he is wrong, that is great. It would be a massive relief for everyone, which Zhangyi cannot really argue with. He tells the stressed young master not to worry so much. Everything is going to be exposed after a very quick investigation. He explains that someone around here has been hiding a dark secret. They have been secretly exposing the elder to toxic demonic energy over a long period. At first, the slow poisoning would not show any obvious symptoms. Casually picking his teeth, Chung Myung continues to mull over the sinister possibilities. Still skeptical, Jongyi asks how exactly he plans to carry out this search. How will he investigate? By simply talking right here in this room. All Jonghai needs to do is sit back and watch the magic happen. Chung Myung grins. He knows things are about to get wild. He immediately asks his host for a favor, who happily agrees to help. Holding a thin-necked bottle, the boy asks for one more drink. Specifically, a fresh bottle of that sweet Yantai liquor. Meanwhile, elsewhere, another man eats with pure hatred in his eyes. His anger is so incredibly intense that his chopsticks literally snap in half. It is Muksung, the Southern Edge leader, fuming over that Mount Hua brat. He cannot believe they let that kid into the merchant guild. The boy's name sounds incredibly familiar, and then it hits him. It is a name deeply tied to the legendary Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Songbik, a second-class disciple, asks if he means that very legend. The elder's response is instant, exploding into pure and absolute fury. He slams his fist down, shouting that the scoundrel deserves no respect. Songbik watches quietly, noting his master's sudden loss of control. The elder always loses his mind whenever anyone mentions Mount Hua. This puzzles the young disciple. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint is dead. He died over 100 years ago, yet his shadow remains. Hoping to calm things, Songbik urges his master to relax. But Muksung snaps back, furious about the arrogant brat's claims. The kid claims he can heal Elder Hwang, yet they must ignore it. Songbik asks seriously if the boy can actually heal him. The leader calms down, admitting the elder's health is genuinely improving. This news shocks Songbik, forcing him to look down. He knows Elder Hwang is famous for always paying his debts. If the boy cures him, the merchant guild will owe Mount Hua. And honestly, a massive debt like that changes absolutely everything. The guild would never let Mount Hua struggle again, backing them completely. They would pour limitless wealth into rebuilding their fallen sect. Songbik realizes they have to stop this at all costs. He turns to his master, declaring that they simply must eliminate the obstacle. They just need to get that annoying boy out of the way immediately. Even if the masters cannot act, the disciples can easily challenge him. A quick duel between disciples of rival sects is completely normal here. The master frowns, questioning if this looks like bullying. It might start bad rumors that they are picking on kids. But Songbik argues everyone already knows about their ancient rivalry. No one would find a sudden confrontation strange or unusual. They can frame it as a random, friendly sparring match. Silence fills the room as the elder slowly begins to calm down. He taps his finger on the table, acknowledging the clever point. However, he refuses to allow it, pointing out the boy's lower rank. Challenging a mere third-class disciple would look terrible for them. It would utterly ruin the high prestige of the Southern Edge sect. Bullying a kid from a dying sect looks terrible, but Beak just smugly grins, ignoring the strict rules. Beak grabs his sword and mutters that he will pretend his leader never forbade. This, standing up, he adds that if a disciple makes a mistake, punishment is simple enough. In a dead calm voice, the leader agrees and promises he will personally deal with anyone touching that kid. Songbik gets the hint loud and clear. Sure, there is punishment, but there is also a secret reward waiting. He won't forget it. The young disciple quietly slips out. Doors slam, sipping hot tea. The elder reflects that it makes sense for his disciple to look down on Mount Hua. When Songbik was born, that place was already falling apart, yet back then Southern Edge could not even compete. He knows if that devastating demonic invasion had not broken Mount Hua, they would still be in second place today. He cannot let those dark, humiliating times of being second best ever return. If a kid traveled all this way, Mount Hua might be spreading its wings again. This worries him deeply, directly threatening their hard-earned dominance. Moxon believed his old schemes had buried them too deep to ever rise. Faced with this threat, he decides to speak with the sect leader immediately. Meanwhile, the two disciples pace down the bustling street together. Wingo, a second-class disciple, asks his senior about their next move. What will he do with the kid? Songbeak has a plan. He will simply convince the young boy to go back home. Bullying kids is not his style, but it beats an elder doing it. Wingo wonders why Mount Hua would send a child on this mission. Reckless decisions like that are completely forbidden in their own sect. Songbeak simply notes that other sects operate under different rules. We cannot forget our main goal is to help our elder. Suddenly, Songbeak stops dead in his tracks and stares ahead. Talk about perfect timing, they do not even have to search for him. Just up ahead, a carefree boy walks while whistling a happy tune. He is wearing the plum blossom uniform. It is Chung Myung. Songbeak approaches the young protagonist to get his immediate attention. He says it is an absolute honor to meet a Mount Hua disciple. Then he introduces himself as Songbeak of the Southern Edge. Chung Myung simply nods with a completely lazy and effortless greeting. Stunned by his total lack of manners, Songbeak asks his destination. The kid casually says he is going to treat Elder Hwang. This incredibly casual response leaves the young disciple completely and utterly speechless. He finds the boy's entire attitude to be incredibly bold. No child could cure an illness that defeated the best doctors. Yet this brat speaks like it is absolute child's play. Forcing a tight smile, Songbeak holds out his hand to him. He asks for a brief moment of his time to explain everything. For generations, the Southern Edge and Mount Hua sects have clashed in endless sword duels. Their ancient rivalry is kept alive through an annual joint conference. Songbeak wonders if Chung Myung knows about this legendary event. But the boy shrugs it off. He only joined the Mount Hua sect recently. Resting his hand on his hilt, Songbeak thinks this rookie is way too arrogant. If he had actually seen the tournament, he would be singing a different tune. He offers to let the kid experience true Southern Edge swordsmanship, claiming it would be highly beneficial for the young disciple's training. He asks for a friendly duel, fully expecting a quick rejection. But before the thought can even fully form in his mind, he is cut off. Chung Myung smirks, instantly calling out the older disciple for trying to pick a fight. Songbeak is completely taken aback, stunned silent by the kid's blunt attitude. He stammers it is not a street brawl, just a polite exchange of techniques. But our main character has absolutely no patience for sugar-coated words. He calls the whole thing absolute nonsense with a massive sigh. Stop beating around the bush, a duel is a fight, plain and simple. He dares him to step up, warning him not to regret it later. The wind suddenly picks up, swirling leaves around them in a tight circle. They step back, creating space as tension builds to a boiling point. Gripping his scabbard, Songbeak demands to know the boy's monastic name. With his hands lazily stuffed in his pockets, the kid shrugs. No fancy title, just Chung Myung. Songbeak simply nods at this. Seeing his youth, the senior disciple decides to offer some final advice. He warns that the world does not care about right and wrong. Going back to Mount Hua now is his best chance to avoid disaster. But get this, our main character has officially reached his limit for boring lectures. He cuts him off, asking if they are actually going to fight. Or do Southern Edge disciples just prefer talking over using their swords? That heavy insult deeply stings the other disciples, watching nearby. One clenches his fist, but Songbeak raises a hand for silence. His hand trembles on his sword. Rage is slowly taking the wheel. He realizes he is losing his cool, but honestly, he does not care anymore. The only thing on his mind now is beating this brat to a pulp. Songbeak drops into his stance, bracing his body for the clash. He channels his energy. With a surge of power, he formally announces his name and status. Songbeak of the Southern Edge sect requests a duel. He calls out Chung Myung of Mount Hua, ready to strike. But our main character suddenly holds up a hand. Wait a second. Songbeak is utterly confused, demanding to know what is wrong now. Chung Myung reveals he was not even talking to him, though. He points right past his opponent, targeting the other disciple standing behind him. That guy points to himself in absolute shock as the request lands. Chung Myung bluntly asks to borrow his sword for the duel. For a true swordsman, lending your weapon is an absolute disgrace. A true swordsman never lets another soul touch his weapon. Songbeak demands to know what kind of warrior walks around weaponless. Chung Myung shrugs, saying he simply did not expect to fight today. If they cannot spare a sword, he can just improvise with whatever is around. Realizing the boy is serious, Songbeak tells his companion to Toss it over because fighting an unarmed opponent is just shameful. With a sigh, the other disciple calls out to Chung Myung and tosses the sheathed weapon forward. The heavy wooden scabbard flies through the air, and the main character catches it with ease, thanking him before resting the sword.